Chapter 113. Tiange finished cultivating in her great circulatory cycle and opened her eyes. Cultivating here, she found that her cultivation progress was unbelievably fast. She had 5 spiritual roots, so it wasn't easy for her to retain spiritual aura in her body. However, in this place, the 5 spiritual roots were circulating, so her spiritual aura absorption speed was several times faster than on Mount Taikong. Normally, the density of spiritual aura would affect the speed of spiritual aura absorption, but her spiritual roots were too poor. Her absorption speed was at most 1 or 2 times faster, never 4 or 5 times faster. Moreover, ever since she entered the foundation building realm, her cultivation level had been stagnant for the past 6 months. In the past 2 days, however, her cultivation level rose very quickly. Since she handed over the art of Sunu, Zhong Muling had been studying it in seclusion. The other master of this place, Yuan Bao, was very kind. After talking to her a lot, she finally learned the reason. As it turned out, this place was called the Virtual Sky World. It was said to be an independent space created by someone with great divine power in the distant past era. There was light and water inside, and it was self-sustaining. Others couldn't enter without permission. In other words, the master of this place was a god. In the distant past era, this virtual sky world was also a magical object. Only people with great divine power could possess it. In today's world, it was even more of a heaven-defying object. The spiritual aura here was the same as in the distant past era, so the cultivation speed here was extremely fast. Zhong Muling obtained this object by chance. Tiange was quite envious of this. A portable immortal's cave with such dense spiritual aura was very safe and convenient to hide. It was truly a first-class weapon for killing and escaping. She was even more envious when she learned that after reaching the deification realm, its master could make it fly like a magic weapon. Nevertheless, she also knew this thing was extraordinary. For deification realm experts like them, this thing was also a heaven-defying treasure. Daoist Yuan Bao also said that as far as they knew, aside from them, there was only one other deification realm cultivator who had a virtual sky world, so Tiange was just thinking about it. Tiange was very curious about this senior Yuan Bao. He seemed to have never met an outsider for many years, so he talked with her in high spirits, allowing her to understand a lot of things. As it turned out, this great ancestor of hers, Zhong Muling, not only had the spiritual roots of the origin, but his yin and yang were also exactly half. He had the purest neutral body, and his blood was also known as the blood of origin of heaven. This heavenly origin blood could only be obtained by those with a neutral primordial epic spirit root. It was an excellent primer for alchemy. When Zhong Muling was young, he entered a cultivation group that specialized in concocting pills. His master treated him very well, so he never knew he had a special constitution. Later, when his master passed away and he was imprisoned by his martial uncle, he finally realized he wasn't immortal. Later on, when he escaped from the sect, he experienced many things and stumbled along until he reached the core formation stage. Only then did his situation improve a bit. After that, with the miraculous effects of the art of origin and the blood of heaven's origin, he entered the soul formation stage in one go and never entered the world again. When Tiange heard this, she felt a bit closer to this ancestor. She herself has the constitution of pure yin, so she has always been very careful. She is inevitably depressed because of this. It turns out that this ancestor also has the same troubles. Since he can cultivate to the divinity realm in the same environment, she is very confident that with the method of the origin, she can also do it. As for Daoist Yuan Bao, his experience was much simpler. He was born in a big cultivation family and was in a big cultivation group. He had a constitution of pure yang and a single spiritual root. Ever since he was a child, he was pampered by his sect and family. In addition, he himself was pure, so he cultivated until he reached the nascent soul realm. Later on, he broke through and entered the soul formation realm. Soul formation cultivators are indifferent to everything in the secular world. Moreover, when his relatives and friends passed away one by one, he felt bored, so he left his family and cultivation group. Yuan Bao spoke calmly, but Tiange was very jealous. Although Zhong Muling was also a genius in the distant past era, he also experienced a lot of hardships to achieve what he had. Yuan Bao, on the other hand, was a genius since he was a child and was carefully cultivated by his family and cultivation group. His cultivation path was too smooth, so smooth that she, who was born with hardships, was jealous. She couldn't help but wonder if Zhong Muling's bad attitude toward Yuan Bao was also because of this. Yuan Bao met Zhong Muling when he reached the peak of the nascent soul realm and tried to enter the soul formation realm. In order to enter the soul formation realm, Yuan Bao had lived in his family and cultivation group since he was a child, so he didn't understand the world at all. Because of this, he left his family and cultivation group and wandered around the world. One day, he was very bored and squatting in a cultivation market square. When he saw Zhong Muling walking back and forth in front of him, he got excited and followed him, wanting to tease him. Just like that, they got to know each other. Originally, the two of them were just seniors teasing juniors. Who would have thought that Zhong Muling would also enter the soul formation realm? Only then did they become good friends. Cultivation in this world wasn't easy, and there were only a few soul formation realm cultivators. Only the two of them were similar in age, so they lived in seclusion together for several thousand years. Speaking of this, Yuan Bao's eyes looked quite lonely. He seemed to be very happy to have someone to accompany him, causing Mo Tiange to sigh inwardly. They also didn't know how long a soul formation realm cultivator's lifespan was. After several thousand years, they still didn't know the end of their lifespan. Hearing Yuan Bao's words, such a simple-minded person actually felt lonely. Mo Tiange couldn't help but think, wasn't the purpose of cultivation to live forever? If he still felt lonely and sad in the end, why would he want to live forever? Yuan Bao said with a smile. Although living forever was lonely, there were many beautiful things that he had to experience while alive. Therefore, if he had to choose, he would still walk on the path of cultivation and walk on the path of immortality. Otherwise, after several decades of life, some things would end before he could understand them. That would be too short. Besides, there were always ways to relieve loneliness. If he died, he wouldn't be able to experience anything. In addition, Yuan Bao also told her about Mo Yaoqing. It turned out her feeling wasn't wrong. Between Mo Yaoqing and Zhong Muling, there was only the matter between husband and wife, but there was no love between husband and wife. In the past, Mo Yaoqing plotted against Zhong Muling in order to advance to the nascent soul realm, which was why they had the fate of dual cultivation. Because of some reasons, Zhong Muling really wanted to have children. Mo Yaoqing also helped him in other matters, so he didn't care about this matter. Later, when he reached the deification realm, he found out that after one night of being husband and wife, Mo Yaoqing actually gave birth to children. However, Mo Yaoqing had already passed away. He was happy and also a bit grateful to Mo Yaoqing, so he decided to travel the world in the virtual sky world. If he reached the celestial pole, he would visit his descendants. Mo Tiange felt a bit relieved when she thought about this. Zhong Muling wanted to have children. Although his descendants had the surname Mo, he always looked after them, so he would definitely take care of her. Just as she was thinking, a voice suddenly rang in her ears. "Tiange, come to my room." It was Zhong Muling's voice. Mo Tiange stood up and straightened her clothes. Knowing that the master of this room was her ancestor, she was naturally ecstatic. However, since she started cultivating, she had experienced too many things, so her mind was very calm, so she soon calmed down. Her spiritual roots of the origin were inherited from this great ancestor. For the sake of this rare spiritual root, this great ancestor was very kind to her and previously revealed his intention to give her a cultivation technique. She didn't want more than that. As long as she could get a suitable cultivation technique, she would be satisfied. "Greetings, great ancestor." Zhong Muling sat cross-legged on the praying mat and pointed at the opposite side of him. When she sat down, he said amiably, "Do you know what's so special about spiritual roots of the origin?" Mo Tiange answered, "Junior only knows that spiritual roots of the origin are one of several special spiritual roots, but I don't know its real use." Zhong Muling smiled. He wasn't surprised by this answer. Very few people knew about the special characteristics of spiritual roots of the origin. The so-called origin is the origin of primordial chaos. At the beginning of the world was chaotic. The 5 elements were born, and yin and yang began to grow. Thus, a world where the 5 elements reinforced and restrained each other, and yin and yang cycled back and forth, growing and multiplying endlessly. Spiritual roots of the origin refer to spiritual roots of the 5 elements that have the same strength and can achieve a balance inside the body. Do you understand now that I put it this way? Tiange was a bit shocked. The so-called primordial chaos was the origin of the world. Spiritual roots of the origin could actually be explained in this way? She calmed herself down and pondered for a moment, then said slowly, "Great ancestor, do you mean that spiritual roots of the origin are used to cultivate a world of primordial chaos?" Zhong Muling nodded. Correct. This is a cultivation technique from the distant past era. Later on it was gradually lost. I dare say that aside from me, no one else knows this cultivation method. I see. She never thought that spiritual roots of the origin would actually be related to the distant past era. In other words, her spiritual roots were actually excellent? I also obtained this cultivation technique by accident. Otherwise, I'd also have 5 spiritual roots. Since I don't have your pure yin constitution, I'd only have a waste spiritual root. Your pure yin constitution is actually not suitable for cultivating spiritual roots of the origin. You must know that the elements of primordial chaos include the 5 elements and yin and yang. In the past, I happened to have a balanced body of yin and yang, so my cultivation speed was very fast. You, on the other hand, have a solitary yin that doesn't grow, and a solitary yang that doesn't grow. Hearing Zhong Muling's words, Tiange's heart suddenly became cold. She just had hope for her innate talent, but she was actually happy for nothing? Upon seeing her expression, Zhong Muling once again smiled and said, "Pure yin constitution and spiritual roots of the origin. It's originally very hard to obtain even one of them. Now that you've obtained both, you'll have to give a discount. However, you don't need to be depressed. Pure yin constitution has other benefits. It's not like you can't cultivate the art of the origin. Yin and yang both have 5 elements, so you can cultivate the 5 elements of yin first. In the past 2 days, I've carefully studied your art of Sunu and modified it a bit. I added the cultivation method of the art of the origin. From now on, let's call it the Sunu art of the origin." Zhong Muling pointed at the 2 jade slips on the table. "This is my original art of the origin, Taiyuan record. This is the Sunu art of the origin I modified. I gave this Taiyuan record to you because I don't have a pure yin constitution. This Sunu art of the origin was derived from my deduction. If this cultivation technique isn't to your liking, you can just recultivate this Taiyuan record." Hearing this, Tiange was somewhat overwhelmed by the favor. She originally thought Zhong Muling being willing to modify her cultivation technique was already very good. She didn't expect he would directly give her the art of the origin and even say such things. "Great ancestor," Zhong Muling pondered for a moment, then said, "Although you're my descendant, I can't keep you in this virtual sky world. This virtual sky world is a space from the distant past era. Cultivating here will naturally be very fast, but without worldly experience, your mental state will certainly be lacking. At that time, making a realm breakthrough will become a problem. Now that you're an elite disciple of a famous cultivation group and have a promising future, I won't keep you here. You can stay here for a while and practice this Sunu art of the origin to see if it's feasible. When the time comes, I'll give you several treasures as a token of our blood ties." "Yes," Tiange answered. She didn't have any delusions about staying here. After all, several thousand years had passed, and the blood ties between her and this great ancestor were very faint. It was already very good that he was willing to take care of her. Seeing how obedient she was, Zhong Muling seemed to feel a bit sorry for her. He said, "During this time, if you have any problems, you can ask me. Although I won't do everything for you, I won't let you be bullied by others." Chapter 114. Time is constant, space is balance. Heaven and earth are divided into yin and yang, containing the 5 elements. Metal gives birth to water, water gives birth to wood, wood gives birth to fire, fire gives birth to metal. Metal subdues wood, wood subdues earth, earth subdues water, water subdues fire, and fire subdues metal. Metal is yin, so it's sharp, metal is yang, so it gathers thunder, so it's lead. Wood is yin, so it's spirit, wood is yang, so it drives away evil, so it's break. Water is yin, so it's crystallized, water is yang, so it's illusionary. Fire is yin, so it gathers souls, so it's dark, fire is yang, so it's immortal, so it's nirvana. Earth is yin, so it's immortal, earth is yang, so it's firm, so it's unbreakable. Opening Taiyuan record, she saw these words at the beginning. The origin was the origin of the primordial chaos. From the beginning of the world's creation, heaven and earth were chaotic. Until the beginning of the primordial world, the sun and moon were hidden, the 4 seasons changed, the world was balanced, and time became constant. This Taiyuan record revolved around the 2 words, constant. When she opened the Sunu art of the origin again, the words at the beginning had been replaced. She couldn't help but sigh as she read them one by one. 4 foundation-building cultivators like her, deification cultivators, were really like celestial beings. Zhong Muling didn't have a pure yin body. Just by examining the way the spiritual aura in her body worked, this Sunu art of the origin seemed to be created by her. Bit by bit, everything matched perfectly. At first glance, she felt like she was in a trance. After she finished memorizing the contents, she tried to cultivate in this small hut. Sitting cross-legged, she first moved her spiritual aura in a great circle before guiding it to slowly move along her meridians. Her spiritual aura had completely turned into Yin's spiritual aura. Right now, it flowed along her meridians, moving around according to the key points of the Sunu art of the origin. After the spiritual aura circled around her and returned to her dantian, it seemed to have triggered something. She suddenly felt her meridians contract, and she felt pain all over her body as countless spiritual auras suddenly poured into her. The spiritual aura in this virtual sky world was dense. In an instant, countless spiritual auras seemed to pour into her dantian. She knew this was normal, so she didn't panic. She slowly guided the spiritual aura into her meridians, little by little, into her own spiritual aura. Outside the house, under a tree, Zhong Muling and Yuan Bao were sitting across from each other. They were playing chess while chatting with each other. Yuan Bao watched as Zhong Muling glanced at the hut on the side from time to time. He joked, "Do you have to be like this? If there's a problem, we're all here. Do you think we can't save him?" Zhong Muling curled his lips. What problem could there be? I used the divination technique to derive this cultivation method, so it won't be a problem for her to cultivate to the nascent soul stage. Then what are you looking at? Ingot put down a chess piece and said indifferently, "This girl seems to have a good comprehension ability. In my opinion, we should just let her fend for herself. If she can't even comprehend the cultivation method, then there's no need to count on her." Zhong Muling glared at Emotienga and said, "She's just a foundation-building cultivator. Do you expect her to have our comprehension?" "I didn't say that," Yuan Bao said shamelessly. "I won't talk about myself, but before you reached the core formation realm, you didn't have any help. Now, she's an elite disciple of a big cultivation group and has a master and elders. If she can't do that, then what's the point of training her? If you want to achieve something, you can't rely on your elders. You can't lack either of your aptitude or temperament. Otherwise, you'll also fall at the bottleneck of advancing to the next realm. Alas, I suffered a lot in the past." By the time he finished speaking, he was speaking from the bottom of his heart. Relying on his good aptitude, he easily cultivated to the nascent soul realm, but he couldn't pass the deification realm. Although Emotienga's aptitude wasn't bad, her pure Yin constitution weakened her spiritual roots of the origin, so she was naturally inferior to Zhong Muling and him. Presumably, there would be many tests waiting for her in the future. Zhong Muling also fell silent upon hearing what Emotienga said. The two of them played chess in silence for a while. Yuan Bao said, "We've been in the celestial pole for some time. How about we go back to Yunzhong and take a look?" "Oh, Zhong Muling muttered to himself for a while, then said, "That's fine. If there's no problem with this girl's cultivation technique, we'll go back to Yunzhong and play with that old fellow Han Quan while we're at it." Upon hearing this name, Yuan Bao chuckled and said, "Good idea. That phoenix-feathered bird of his is about to shed its feathers. Let's go and fish for some benefits." You're the one who wants to fish for some benefits, right? That bird's feathers are useless to me. Don't be so direct. In any case, what's yours is mine, and what's mine is also yours. We've known each other for so long, do we still need to divide it between us? Scram. Zhong Muling glared at him. Which one of the things you live and use isn't mine? What kind of nice words are you saying? Oh, since you're unhappy, I won't say nice words. I'll just use it in the future. Zhong Muling made a grabbing motion with his hand. A square seal appeared in his hand. In an instant, it swelled to the size of a small mountain and smashed towards Yuan Bao. Yuan Bao's figure flashed and instantly appeared more than 300 meters away. With a loud rumble, the flower field nearby was smashed into pieces, but Yuan Bao wasn't harmed in the slightest. I say, Yuan Bao was about to speak when Zhong Muling waved his hand. The square seal was immediately pulled back by him, and he once again smashed it towards Yuan Bao. Yuan Bao was greatly alarmed. He reached around his waist and a small square shield appeared in his hand. The shield expanded against the wind and managed to block the square seal. I say, while competing with Zhong Muling with spiritual power, Yuan Bao spoke with difficulty, aren't you afraid that the spiritual aura fluctuation is too big and that the little girl's cultivation will go awry and she'll be possessed by the devil? Zhong Muling was startled. He immediately put away the square seal and moved, disappearing from where he stood. Phew! Yuan Bao heaved a sigh of relief. He muttered to himself, this brat, his cultivation level is rising really fast. If I want to win against him now, I'll have to expend a lot of energy. Alas, sooner or later, I'll be surpassed by him. His tone was relaxed, completely devoid of the hardships he faced when he fought against Zhong Muling. The implication was that his cultivation level was much higher than Zhong Muling's. At this moment, inside the small room, Zhong Muling was frowning as if he had a headache. On the praying mat, Emo Tienga's body was crooked. She was already unconscious. How could a small foundation-building cultivator like her withstand the spiritual aura pressure from two deification cultivators? If it wasn't for her pure Yin constitution, her cultivation level would have been crippled already. Even her current situation wouldn't be much better. Although her cultivation level was still there, her spiritual aura was completely out of control under their spiritual aura pressure. Now, her meridians were completely destroyed and her dantian was also riddled with holes. This is troublesome. Zhong Muling pondered for a moment, then said to himself, consider yourself lucky. Now, I have to help you reconstruct your dantian and mend your meridians. I might as well use the 5 spirit fruit to help you change your tendons and cleanse your marrows. Emo Tienga naturally didn't know what the 5 spirit fruit was. It was a spiritual seed that grew at the beginning of the world. One tree was divided into 5 elements, and the 5 fruits formed a whole, so it was called the 5 spirit fruit. It took 10,000 years to germinate, 10,000 years to grow branches, 10,000 years to become a tree, 10,000 years to bloom, 10,000 years to bear fruit, and 50,000 years to grow a 5 spirit fruit. This fruit was hard to find even in the distant past era. Unfortunately, this virtual sky world simulated the spiritual aura environment of the distant past era. When he obtained this fruit, there were 2 5 spirit fruits growing inside it. Now, one of them was already ripe. When Zhong Muling thought of this, his heart ached again. He hadn't even warmed up the 5 spirit fruit, but it was going to be used by someone first. It was all that birdman's fault. Unfortunately, that birdman's noisy voice once again entered his ears. Aling, someone entered the illusory sky formation again. Wei Jiasi opened her eyes in a daze. The previous scene was still fresh in her mind. The 5 demonic beasts kept attacking her. Her water spirit flag was destroyed, and only a few of her other magic tools were left. She thought she was going to die for sure, but she didn't. There was nothing in front of her except the trees that kept moving backward. Moving backward? Startled, she raised her head and was instantly stunned. After a long time, she finally found her voice. Marshall? Marshall, uncle, Qin, she nodded. Seeing that she was awake, he stopped and let go of her. For a moment, Wei Jiasi didn't know what to feel. There was only one thought in her mind. Marshall uncle came to save me. Senior Marshall sister? Second senior Marshall sister. Wei Jiasi immediately straightened her expression. She turned her head and saw Luo Fengxue rushing over. Seeing that Luo Fengxue was safe and sound, Wei Jiasi smiled through her tears. It's great that you're all right. Second senior Marshall sister, I was scared to death. Fortunately, Marshall uncle Shoujing was nearby. Before Wei Jiasi could speak, Qin Shi faintly said, all right, Fengxue. I'll take you back first. Luo Fengxue was stunned. She then said anxiously, but Marshall uncle, Tiange's gone. Qin Shi frowned. Luo Fengxue explained, we were originally with Tienge, but when I was talking to senior Marshall sister just now, Tienge went to keep a lookout nearby. In the end, demonic beasts came. Senior Marshall sister told me to find Tienge and go back first, so I couldn't find her. Qin Shi recalled that when he felt the spiritual aura fluctuation, Luo Fengxue indeed shouted, Tienge. He pondered for a moment, then waved his sleeve. A flying cloud appeared under their feet. You can't be so reckless in the future. I'll take you back first. What about Tienge? Luo Fengxue asked anxiously. This was a dense forest. If Tienge was left here alone, I'm afraid, Qin Shi said, I have my own plans for this matter. You don't need to worry about it. Okay. Luo Fengxue was startled but still answered. Marshall uncle has always been taking care of Tienge, so he probably won't ignore me, right? The flying cloud rose and rapidly flew towards Luoyan Cliff. A core formation cultivator's flying magic weapon was extremely fast. In just a moment, they arrived at Luoyan Cliff. After putting Wei Jiasi and Luo Fengxue down, Qin Shi said, you two can go back first. Fengxue, report to your master that I'm safe and sound. If I find Tienge, I'll come back. Marshall uncle, are you going to look for Tienge? Luo Fengxue hurriedly stepped forward. Qin Shi showed a faint smile. Don't worry. I'm fine now. You just need to tell your master. But Luo Fengxue still wanted to say something, but Qin Shi had already used the flying cloud, turned around, and left. She could only sigh. She was naturally worried about Tienge, but it wouldn't be good for Marshall uncle to leave just because of Tienge, right? Second senior Marshall sister? Upon seeing Wei Jiasi's silent expression, Luo Fengxue cautiously called out to her. Wei Jiasi glanced at her then shook her head. I'm fine. Luo Fengxue naturally didn't believe Wei Jiasi when she said she was fine. She said sternly, second senior Marshall sister, no matter what, you mustn't go the wrong way again. Wei Jiasi smiled faintly. I know what you want to say. Don't worry. She then turned around and walked towards the big tent without saying anything else. Luo Fengxue thought for a moment then followed her. Second senior Marshall sister, wait for me. Chapter 115. Qin Shi cautiously looked around. He only saw a vast ocean with surging clouds and surging winds. He stood on the ocean like duckweed in the wind. The surging spiritual aura scraped against his body, making him ache fiercely. He knew this was an extremely brilliant formation. The master of this place must be a nascent soul cultivator, so even his peak-fixing lamp couldn't detect any abnormalities. He also knew the master of this place didn't have any evil intentions. A few days ago, he fought against a 7th-rank demonic beast and spent a lot of effort to kill it. In the end, he was injured and happened to enter this formation. During the days he was trapped in the formation, the master of this place didn't do anything to him. This formation was also a trapping formation, not a killing formation, so he simply steeled his heart and healed his injuries on the spot. When he healed, the master opened the formation and let him go. Maybe the master was tired of him, or maybe the master found him pleasing to the eye. However, he didn't have any evil intentions when he entered the formation unintentionally. Now that he wanted to break through the formation, this trapping formation might turn into a killing formation. Before he could figure out what to do, a flash of lightning flashed. Xianxia's figure moved and he instantly dashed thousands of feet away. When he looked back, he was instantly covered in cold sweat. The place where he originally stood had set off monstrous waves that collided with the lightning, creating an earth-shattering rumble. A part of his sleeve had already been burnt. Sure enough, it turned into a killing formation. When he entered this formation a few days ago, every day was an illusory formation and a bewildering formation, which couldn't cause him any real harm. But now, if he was a little slower, he might end up like this sleeve. After thinking for a while, Xianxia closed his eyes and fully released his divine sense. There was an endless ocean. He sighed in disappointment, and his eyes looked gloomy. Sure enough, this formation wasn't something he could break with his current ability. Who was the master of this place? It wasn't like he hadn't seen a nascent soul cultivator's formation before, and he even used the peak-fixing lamp to break a nascent soul cultivator's restriction. Facing a nascent soul expert, even if he didn't have the ability to fight back, he could at least do something. He never felt like he was being trampled on, like he didn't even have a chance to escape. He sighed softly, but a moment later, he closed his eyes and condensed his spiritual aura. He summoned the 3-yang real fire sword from his dantian. Under the spell, the sword shone with dazzling golden light and raged like fire. This 3-yang real fire sword was his natal magic weapon. In one of his adventures in the past, he accidentally obtained a cultivation technique and the method to refine this sword. The two of them were originally a set. When he saw that the two of them combined, their power was astonishing. Moreover, they were compatible with his own spiritual roots, so he chose to make it his natal magic weapon. After forming his gold core, he went through many difficulties and used the golden essence true fire to refine it. As soon as this sword was born, the wind, clouds, and thunder rumbled. That year was also the time of the demonic beast riot. Relying on this sword, Immortal, who had just formed his gold core, became famous in West Kunwo. He speculated that if he had enough spiritual energy, he might even be able to fight against a nascent soul cultivator. Now that he was inside this formation, he could feel the powerful strength of the master of this place. His cultivation level was only in the core formation realm, so he could only try his luck with the 3-yang real fire sword. Lightning flashed again, but Xianxia didn't move. The 3-yang real fire sword floated in the air. With the support of his spiritual aura, it shone brightly. A bolt of lightning finally jumped down. He raised his hand, and the 3-yang real fire sword floated in the air and collided with the lightning. The sword shook, but it managed to withstand the impact. Upon seeing this scene, Xianxia once again made a hand seal. The 3-yang real fire sword absorbed the lightning and stood still. On the contrary, the lightning gradually weakened. One bright, one dim. The fire became fiercer, and the lightning gradually died out. By the time the lightning disappeared, the 3-yang real fire sword was burning like a scorching sun. It was so bright that it couldn't be looked at directly. Xianxia made another hand seal, and a threatening momentum soared into the sky, almost tearing a hole in the sky. After an unknown amount of time, Xianxia's face gradually turned pale. His spiritual aura was almost exhausted, but he couldn't stop. Metal gave birth to lightning, and fire restrained lightning. His 3-yang real fire sword happened to have a metal body and a fire appearance, so he first used fire to resist it, then seized its power and used metal to support its momentum. This power didn't belong to him, so he could barely control it. If he stopped now, he would suffer a backlash. Such a powerful heavenly thunder, and he hadn't mastered his body-refining technique yet. If he fought it head-on, he would definitely die without a corpse. This brat isn't bad. He has my style in the past. At that moment, Ingot was talking to himself inside the virtual sky world. Not bad, not bad. A mere core formation cultivator actually dared to fight against the illusory sky formation by using the mutual restraint of the 5 elements. And, since you're pleasing to the eye, I'll play with you. Right after he finished speaking, Ingot flicked his sleeve, and a crack immediately appeared in front of him. He then jumped into it. Right at this moment, Zhong Muling used both of his hands to support Xianxia, helping her to sit up so that she was sitting cross-legged. One of his hands formed a palm and slapped the top of her head while the other took out a jade box from inside his robe. Zhong Muling's palm emitted an incomparably pure spiritual aura. This spiritual aura was neither yin nor yang. It contained all 5 elements, but it didn't look like impure spiritual aura at all. It seemed to have formed a new kind of spiritual aura, clean, pure, and extremely gentle. This spiritual aura easily entered Xianxia's meridians and dantian, slowly merging with it. Xianxia's pale face gradually recovered. Under the nourishment of his spiritual aura, her vitality seemed to be rapidly restored, and her complexion became ruddy bit by bit. Seeing that she was gradually recovering, Zhong Muling flicked his other hand and opened the jade box, revealing a green branch inside. On the branch, there was a human-shaped fruit that was neither grass nor gold. It was said that after 1,000 years, ginseng could transform into a human form and become a ginseng baby. In fact, only immortal herbs could transform into human forms. In the cultivation world, ginseng was just an ordinary herb with immortal aura. There were countless spiritual herbs with more spiritual aura than ginseng. However, ginseng was the closest species to immortal herbs, so it could grow into a human form. This 5-spirit fruit was an immortal fruit. In the human world today, this kind of immortal root could no longer be found. Only virtual sky worlds, which simulated the primal chaos, could have some of them. However, there weren't many known virtual sky worlds, and he was the only one that had 5-spirit fruits. Zhong Muling picked up the 5-spirit fruit. When he thought about how he had only picked this fruit for a few days, an angry expression appeared on his face. But soon he calmed down. He was already a deification cultivator, so his state of mind had long been calm. Even though this matter made him angry, it only lasted for a moment. He used his spiritual aura to lift the 5-spirit fruit. Under the pure spiritual aura, the fruit slowly melted and turned into a transparent essence. He slowly lifted the essence and poured it into Xianxia's mouth. The essence of the 5-spirit fruit entered her body and slid down along her meridians. Wherever it went, her meridians were restored and slid down to her dantian. The damaged parts were repaired little by little. In the end, it completely immersed and merged with her dantian. After an unknown amount of time, Zhong Muling let go of her and said softly, "The 5-spirit body cultivator is impervious to devil aura. With your pure yin body and the 5-spirit fruit's reconstruction of your meridians, you won't suffer from cultivation deviation in the future aside from inner demons during realm breakthroughs. I've treated you fairly." After an unknown amount of time, Xianxia woke up from her coma. She had a strange dream. In the dream, she seemed to have returned to the beginning of the primal chaos, when heaven and earth were first created. She was surrounded by dense spiritual aura. She greedily absorbed the spiritual aura and swallowed spiritual plants one by one. Her dantian and meridians rapidly evolved and grew, and her cultivation level increased unbelievably fast. When she regained her senses, she saw a pool of blood in front of her. She was cultivating when she suddenly felt a strong spiritual aura pressure. This spiritual aura pressure almost made her lose her ability to move in an instant. She lost control of her spiritual aura and it rushed everywhere in her meridians. She was terrified and wanted to stop cultivating, but the spiritual aura pressure pressed down on her again. Her whole body was in pain and she lost consciousness. Xianxia knew this was cultivation deviation. She couldn't help but feel strange. Martial Uncle Xianin said she had a pure yin constitution. If yin and yang didn't clash, it would be very difficult for her to suffer from cultivation deviation. What was this spiritual aura pressure that made her lose control of her spiritual aura without any ability to resist? However, she immediately thought of a more important matter. If she suffered from cultivation deviation, what about her cultivation level? She hastily sat cross-legged, but when she tried to operate her spiritual aura, she was stunned. Not only was her cultivation level fine, but it even entered the middle stage of the foundation building realm. After being stunned for a moment, Tiange was ecstatic. It had been less than a year since she entered the foundation building realm. Before this, her cultivation level had stagnated. Let alone advancing, even the growth of her spiritual aura was so slow that she almost couldn't feel it. But now, she actually entered the middle stage of the foundation building realm. How could she not be ecstatic? Entering the middle stage of the foundation building realm in half a year was simply inconceivable. Even someone like Yi Jingwen, who reached the middle stage of the foundation building realm at the age of 40, could be considered a genius. "You're awake?" A voice came into her ears. It was Zhong Muling talking to her using his divine sense. Tiange had just entered the middle stage of the foundation building realm, so she knew it must be this great ancestor's doing. She felt even more grateful and answered respectfully, "Yes, great ancestor." "How's your situation?" Junior has entered the middle stage of the foundation building realm. Although Tiange had a calm temperament, she was still very happy. Zhong Muling snorted softly, then said, "That's not what I'm asking. Feel your meridians and dantian." Tiange was startled. She immediately closed her eyes and operated her spiritual aura. Meridians? She didn't notice it before, but now she realized that her meridians seemed to have become elastic. No matter how much spiritual aura she operated, she didn't feel any pain. No matter how much she operated her spiritual aura, her meridians could completely accommodate it. As for her dantian, it seemed, no matter how much spiritual aura there was, it could accommodate it. 5 spirit fruit. Zhong Muling was still a bit indignant, but he calmly said to her, "I wasn't paying attention for a moment and forgot you were cultivating and couldn't be disturbed, so I caused you to have a cultivation deviation. I've already used the 5 spirit fruit to help you reconstruct your meridians, change your tendons, and cleanse your marrows. In the future, you'll never have a cultivation deviation again. Of course, that doesn't include the inner demon during your realm breakthrough." Never have a cultivation deviation? Tiange regained her train of thought. She was even more ecstatic than before. This was much more difficult than the middle stage of the foundation building realm. Never have a cultivation deviation. Didn't that mean she didn't need to worry about cultivating the soul refining art? Junior doesn't know how to repay great ancestors' kindness, Zhong Muling said faintly. "I'm already a deification expert. In this human world, I'm almost like a god. Why would I expect you to repay me? Since you're my descendant, I'm naturally willing to take care of you." Yes, Junior has said too much. Junior will certainly cultivate diligently in the future and won't let great ancestor down. There's another matter. When you had a cultivation deviation, that boy surnamed Qin broke into the illusory sky formation. He said he was looking for you. I saw he was quite courageous, so I let him stay. Do you want to meet him? Chapter 116. Deification Cultivators. Qin Shi looked at the 2 men in front of him. He was more shocked than vigilant. Although he had heard from his master that soul formation stage cultivators did exist in this world, these old monsters had long gone into seclusion. No one had seen them for nearly 1,000 years. He didn't expect to see 2 of them at once. Zhong Muling looked up at him and narrowed his eyes. "Brat, I was in a good mood a few days ago and let you go. Why are you rushing into the formation today?" Qin Shi quickly regained his composure and saluted him calmly. "Senior, please forgive me. Junior came to look for someone. I didn't intend to rush into the formation." "Looking for someone?" Yuan Bao looked at his clothes and asked, "Who are you looking for?" Qin Shi answered respectfully, "Junior is a disciple of Xianxia school. I came to look for a fellow disciple and boldly entered the formation. Please forgive me, Senior." Yuan Bao and Zhong Muling looked at each other. They both understood what was going on. Zhong Muling had a good impression of this person who was willing to take the risk to rush into the formation for his descendant with a respectful attitude without the slightest hint of flattery. He said kindly, "There's someone, but I don't know if she's the one you're looking for. Tell me your name." Upon hearing what they said, Qin Shi knew Tiange was most likely here. Since these 2 deification seniors were very friendly, he said bluntly, "The person Junior is looking for is called Tiange. I wonder if she's the person Senior mentioned?" Zhong Muling raised the corner of his mouth and stared at him meaningfully. What's your relationship? You're willing to take such a big risk to save her? Qin, she said, Junior is her senior in the school, so I naturally tried my best to save her. Zhong Muling cast him a glance, then waved his hand. A golden sword flew from the sky and fell into his hand. 3 young real fire sword. Someone actually refined it. Qin, she was stunned. Senior knows this sword? Zhong Muling let out a soft. With a wave of his hand, he threw the 3 young real fire sword to Imotienga. I've seen it in an ancient cultivator's handwritten notes. You're actually quite lucky to actually obtain this kind of ancient magic weapon. On the side, Yuan Bao laughed and said, Aling, compared to the yang spiritual bead in his body, this 3 yang real fire sword is nothing. Tifkeiske, a yang spiritual bead. I really don't know what kind of luck this brat has to actually obtain such a rare treasure. If I had a yang spiritual bead, how could I have been stuck at the threshold of the deification realm for so long back then? As he spoke, he kept glancing at Qin Shi. Qin Shi felt goosebumps all over his body from the malicious gaze, but he also knew that in front of a deification cultivator he was nothing more than an ant. With his current strength, he simply couldn't resist what the other party wanted to do, so he quickly calmed down. Senior has good eyesight. I do have a yang spiritual bead on me. I obtained it by chance in the past. After so many years, I've finally managed to fuse it for my own use. His calmness somewhat surprised Yuan Bao. He turned around and said to Zhong Muling with a smile, Aling, his willpower is comparable to yours. Zhong Muling said faintly, Don't think everyone is like you. Although the tone was light, there was a hint of disdain in it. How could Ingot not hear it? He immediately shouted, What do you mean? Nothing. Zhong Muling didn't even move his eyebrows. Without waiting for Yuan Bao to refute, he turned towards Qin Shi and said, Junior, for the sake of the 3 yang real fire sword, if you walk out of this formation, I'll let you see the person you want to see. Right after he finished speaking, before Qin Shi could answer, Zhong Muling waved his hand and disappeared along with Yuan Bao. Qin Shi stared at the glaciers that filled the sky and frowned. Just as he was about to sigh, he suddenly clutched his chest and spat out a mouthful of blood. She pushed the door open and saw the person sitting cross-legged on the ground. She was startled and said, Senior Martial Brother Qin. She didn't know that Zhong Muling, who was paying attention to the movements in the small room, was frowning slightly. After being startled for a moment, she immediately rushed over. From Zhong Muling's tone, she originally thought the person who came was Martial Uncle Shoujing. She thought she could finally see Martial Uncle Shoujing, whom she'd only heard of but never met. Unexpectedly, it was actually Senior Martial Brother Qin. Seeing Qin, she made her feel both relieved and uneasy. She felt relieved because he was right in front of her, so his life wasn't in danger. However, she felt uneasy because his face was pale and his hands and feet were ice cold. It seemed like he couldn't hear her voice at all. His eyes were closed and he was motionless. It seemed like he was seriously injured. Imotienga approached him and touched his hand. Upon discovering that it was as cold as ice, she immediately called out, Great Ancestor, what's wrong with Senior Martial Brother Qin? After a moment of silence, Zhong Muling's voice rang out. This brat's vitality was injured in the illusory sky formation. You don't need to worry. Both his metal and fire spiritual roots are yang, and he also has a yang spiritual bead in his body. Ice and snow can't hurt him. His meridians are just temporarily frozen. He'll wake up after a while. Oh! Imotienga heaved a sigh of relief after hearing Zhong Muling's explanation. Seeing that Qin Shi didn't move, she thought for a moment then sat down next to him. Right now, even Qin Shi's eyebrows were covered in a layer of frost. Imotienga guessed this was probably the effect of an ice and snow bewildering formation similar to the desert bewildering formation she encountered before. However, why was Senior Martial Brother Qin here? Great Ancestor, she called out again. And Zhong Muling answered. Can you help Senior Martial Brother Qin? Zhong Muling paused for a while then said impatiently, It's not that troublesome. He just needs to adjust his breathing for a while and he'll be fine. But, Shut up. It's noisy. Just squat down for me. Oh. Zhong Muling was obviously unhappy, so Tiange didn't dare to say anything else. She just stood on the side and watched Xianxia in silence. In the past few days, she obtained too many fated chances, so she temporarily forgot about the outside world. Now that she saw Xianxia, she couldn't help but recall what happened before she came here. How did Feng Shui and Senior Marshal Sister Wei go? Did they persuade Senior Marshal Sister Wei? What if they didn't? Are they safe? Xianxia let his imagination run wild. After an unknown amount of time, he suddenly moved. Tiange hastily jumped up. Senior Marshal Brother Qin. Xianxia moved his eyelids and slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was a joyful face smiling at him. Senior Marshal Brother Qin, you've finally woken up. Xianxia closed his eyes again. When his breathing gradually calmed down, he opened his eyes and smiled. Tiange, are you all right? Seeing that the first thing he asked after waking up was her, Tiange's heart skipped a beat. She smiled and said, I'm fine. How about you, Senior Marshal Brother Qin? I'm also fine. It's just a small injury. I'll go back and slowly recuperate. After looking around, she stood up with some difficulty. This place is... With such dense spiritual aura, what kind of paradise was this? His own Immortal's cave was located in the place with the densest spiritual aura on Clear's Spring Peak. It also had a high-grade spirit-gathering formation, but it was still much worse than this place. This is the Virtual Sky World. Virtual Sky World? She frowned slightly, wondering where he heard this name. Tiange immediately said, Senior Marshal Brother Qin, don't think too much. This is Senior Yuan Bao and my great ancestor's cave. Nothing will happen. Great ancestor? Yes. Tiange nodded and said, I was also shocked when I first found out. My great ancestor's surname is Zhong, and his name is Mu Ling. He's also the master of this place. Could the master of this place be those two deification seniors? As he thought of this, Xianxia's eyes were filled with surprise and confusion. Great ancestor was his grandfather's grandfather. However, cultivators had a long lifespan, and they didn't know how many generations their children and grandchildren had. Great ancestor could also refer to an ancestor whose seniority couldn't be called, but there was one thing that was correct. These two people were related by blood. Could it be that one of those two deification seniors was related by blood to her? As soon as this thought appeared, she didn't know why, but he suddenly felt upset. Before he could figure out what was going on, he heard Tiange say, I'll tell you about this in detail when we go back. Senior Marshal Brother Qin, are you really okay? She smiled and said, I'm fine. Don't worry. I'll be fine after a few days of rest. What about you? Are you injured? Tiange smiled and said, not only am I not injured, but I also obtained a lot of benefits. Tiange released her aura and looked at him with a smile. Senior Marshal Brother Qin, look at me. What's different about me? She sensed for a moment and was shocked. You advanced to the middle stage? Tiange nodded happily. She didn't plan to tell him about the 5 spirit fruit, but she obtained the art of the origin and advanced to the middle stage. As long as she returned to Xianxia school, she definitely wouldn't be able to hide it, so she might as well tell him directly. She entered the middle stage of the foundation building realm less than a year ago. Although he had encountered a lot of fated chances, he was still quite surprised. However, when he thought of those 2 deification cultivators, he felt it was only natural. She smiled and said, Congratulations, congratulations. You're already in the middle stage of the foundation building realm at such a young age. You can be considered the first person in Xianxia school. And, if you work hard, you should have a good chance of forming your gold core within 100 years. Although I'm not sure I can build my foundation building realm, I'll still accept your auspicious words. After a pause, Tiange remembered something. Right, Senior Marshal Brother Qin, did you come to see me? She nodded. I heard you went missing here, so I came to see you. Really? Senior Marshal Brother Qin, didn't you go missing with Marshal Uncle Shoujing? What about Martial Uncle Shoujing? Qin, she paused for a moment then said, we're all fine, but you said this place is your great ancestor's Immortal's cave. Is it one of those two seniors? Mo Tiange nodded then said apologetically, Senior Martial Brother Qin, I'm really sorry. If I found out earlier, you wouldn't have been injured. It's nothing. Qin, she shook his head faintly. I'm not injured, so you don't have to be like this. Right, what's your situation now? Since your great ancestor is a deification senior, should he stay here? Mo Tiange shook her head and said, of course not. Right, Senior Martial Brother Qin, you just woke up. Do you want to rest for a while? In any case, we still have time to talk. I'll go with you in a few days, and then I'll slowly talk to you. Upon hearing this, Qin, she smiled. His heart instantly calmed down and he said, that's fine. This place is full of spiritual aura, so we mustn't waste it. We'll slowly talk when we get back. And you can continue healing. I won't disturb you anymore. After watching Mo Tiange leave the room, Qin, she sat down on the praying mat. Before he could heave a sigh of relief, a strong gust of wind suddenly hit him. He didn't have time to react at all, so the wind directly blew against his body. The spiritual aura inside his body suddenly surged uncontrollably, causing him to vomit another mouthful of blood. Zhong Muling's voice rang out inside the room. Why did you hide her identity? If you don't explain, don't blame me for taking your life. Chapter 117. When Mo Tiange walked out of the hut, she saw Zhong Muling standing by the pool with his hands clasped behind his back. It was unclear what he was thinking. She gently approached and greeted, Great Ancestor. After a long time, Zhong Muling finally moved. He glanced at her and said, You've stayed here for 7 days. It's time for you to leave. Mo Tiange nodded. Does Great Ancestor have any other instructions? You have your own opportunities. Why do you need me to instruct you? After saying that indifferently, Zhong Muling flicked his sleeve, causing a Qianquan bag to appear on the table under the tree. I've already refined your spirit-concealing pendant. With it, you can even pretend to be immortal. Thank you, Great Ancestor. Mo Tiange didn't try to be polite. Her breath-concealing technique wasn't very good, but with this thing, it would be much more convenient for her to do things in the future. However, there were still many things inside. Great Ancestor, then that purple wooden cauldron is the pill furnace I used in the past. It's no longer useful. Since you're practicing alchemy, I'll give it to you. That silk handkerchief is a defensive magic treasure that can also be used for flight. I have already recorded the incantation on the jade slip. You have to walk the path of cultivation on your own. This is all I can help you with. Whether or not you can reach core formation, nascent soul, or even soul formation, all depends on your own ability. Mo Tiange put these things away. She knew her fate with this great ancestor was over. They were soul formation cultivators, and they would go into seclusion for hundreds of years. They might not even set foot in this place for 1,000 years. They might not even see each other again in the future. All right, I'll send you off now. Yes. Zhong Muling raised his hand, causing a dot of light the size of a broad bean to appear between his eyebrows. He muttered an incantation, causing the light to become brighter and brighter. Gradually, it turned into a huge bead and fell on his hand. Mo Tiange furrowed her brows as she stared at the bead. She stared fixedly at it. Zhong Muling didn't stop chanting. In the end, he cast an incantation on the bead, tearing a crack in the air. Go. Mo Tiange was about to speak, but before she could say anything, she felt her vision darken and then brightened. She had already disappeared from the virtual sky world. Tiange raised her head and looked around. This was a hilltop, and there was nothing around her. They'd probably already left. She sighed. She still had questions to ask. Tiange? Oh. Upon hearing Qin-Shi's voice, Mo Tiange turned her head around and was immediately gobsmacked. Qin-Shi seemed to be a bit unsteady on his feet, and his complexion was ashen. Obviously, his injuries hadn't healed yet. She remembered that her great ancestor clearly said his injuries weren't a hindrance, so how could this be? Senior brother Qin, what's wrong? Qin she just propped himself up and shook his head. Let's go back first. After saying that, he didn't explain anything and summoned his flying sword, pulling her along as he flew towards Luoyan Cliff. Zhong Muling was meticulous. They were already far away from the forest. Qin Shi's expression was very solemn. Mo Tiange only took a few glances at him but didn't say anything. In just a moment, they arrived outside the Luoyan Cliff's array formation. Once they stopped, Qin Shi said, "After you go back, don't tell anyone about this in detail. If someone asks, just tell them I told you not to." "Oh, okay." Qin Shi seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything and just turned his head away. When Mo Tiange glanced at him, she saw a gloomy expression on his face. However, before she could say anything, the disciples in charge of patrolling came over. Soon after, the array was opened and they each went inside. After saying goodbye to Qin Shi, Mo Tiange seemed to be lost in thought. The scene of Zhong Muling opening the virtual sky world kept appearing in her mind. When she returned to the tent, she didn't know where Luo Fengxue went, but there was no one inside. She sat down in her seat and thought for a long time. Eventually, she reached into her Qiankuan bag and rummaged for a while before taking out an object. It was a bead the size of a baby's fist. It contained spiritual aura and was very similar to the one Zhong Muling had. She obtained this bead after she killed that man from An clan on Mount Yunwu. In the past few years, she didn't know what it was used for, so she kept it in her Qiankuan bag without touching it. She didn't know whether this bead was the same as Zhong Muling's, but in terms of appearance, it was very similar. Moreover, even the spiritual aura it sensed was very similar. Zhong Muling's bead had been refined inside his body. The bead he used to open the virtual sky world was most likely a magic weapon related to the virtual sky world. Mo Tiange wondered if she could also obtain a virtual sky world with this bead in hand. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange couldn't help but let her imagination run wild. How good would it be if she had a portable immortal's cave like the virtual sky world? With such dense spiritual aura, spiritual plants would definitely grow quickly if she planted them. She could take them with her wherever she went and wouldn't have to worry about being discovered. The more she thought about it, the more her heart itched. However, just as she was about to ask about this bead, Zhong Muling sent her out of the virtual sky world. Now, she had no one to ask. Even if she had this bead in hand, she could only sigh helplessly. Mo Tiange was about to throw the bead back into her Qiankuan bag when she suddenly remembered what Yuan Bao said. Yuan Bao once chatted with her and said the virtual sky world was a magic weapon that recognized its master. Unless the primordial spirit completely dissipated, other people couldn't take it away. But as long as it recognized its master, it couldn't escape those few methods. After thinking for a while, she suddenly had an idea. She immediately gathered her spiritual aura and lightly cut her fingertip. Blood flowed out and she dripped it on the bead. The bright red blood slowly sank into the white bead and gradually disappeared. All of a sudden, she felt a sharp pain in her head. She felt countless information rushing into her brain in an instant. From the distant past era, birds and beasts, all kinds of spiritual creatures, cultivators and demonic beasts, many words, countless images, these things flashed in front of her eyes as if she had experienced them herself. It was as if someone had stuffed these things into her head. Pain, she didn't know how much time had passed. Maybe it was a long time, or maybe it was only a moment, but her head gradually stopped hurting. Mo Tiange looked up and suddenly widened her eyes. She wasn't sitting in the tent on Luoyan Cliff, but in an unfamiliar place with dense spiritual aura. Among the dense bamboo forest, several bamboo houses were faintly discernible. A winding brook bypassed them and flowed into the distance. A gentle breeze blew into her nose. It was the medicinal fragrance of spiritual plants. Bamboo forest, huts, brook, medicinal fields. She was ecstatic. This was the virtual sky world. It must be the virtual sky world. Mo Tiange suddenly stood up from the ground and ran into the hut. She didn't know how many years it had been since someone entered this hut. The floor was covered with a thick layer of dust, almost covering everything. She used a few simple spells. In the blink of an eye, the hut was spotless. There were tables and chairs made of spiritual bamboo, several praying mats scattered on the ground, and a bookshelf in the corner of the hut filled with books. She gently approached it, pulled out a book from the bookshelf, and opened it. Written on it was an ancient language, written with magic. The animal skin made of the book was soft and tough. She didn't know what demonic beast it belonged to. Closing the book, Xianxia had a strange feeling. She originally didn't know such ancient language, but she understood it at first glance. And she could recognize every single thing in this hut. She walked out of the hut and went around the bamboo forest. As far as her eyes could see, there were spiritual creatures of all sizes. There were trees, flowers, grasses, vines, and countless spiritual creatures crowded together. The ground was covered with layers and layers of thick leaves. She didn't know how many years it took for the plants to grow and die on their own to produce such a scene. Xianxia finally understood. The virtual sky world was a spatial magic weapon left from the distant past era. After it lost its master, no one knew what it was. It fell into the hands of a man from the Yin clan and was eventually obtained by her. If she hadn't happened to enter Zhong Muling's virtual sky world, she probably wouldn't have known she had a rare treasure until she died. How much wealth did the spiritual plants accumulated in this virtual sky world for hundreds of thousands of years amount to? Especially the spiritual plants that were more than 10,000 years old. Any one of them could shock the celestial pole. Xianxia fell to the ground after touching a 10,000-year-old seven-withered grass with her own hands. She couldn't help but laugh dully. Ever since she embarked on the path of cultivation, she encountered a lot of bad luck, but fated chances were very few. This time, in just a few days, she encountered a series of fated chances that ordinary people couldn't encounter in their entire lives. The art of the origin, the five spirits body cultivation technique, the guidance of a deification cultivator, the gift from her great ancestor, and this virtual sky world. This gave her an unreal sense of happiness. But the spiritual plants were real, the soil was real, the hut was real, and the spiritual aura was real. With these things, would she still need to be confused about her future? Xianxia didn't know how much time had passed, but she gradually calmed down. No matter how many spiritual treasures she had, she was still a foundation-building cultivator. As long as she didn't reach the Great Tao, she wouldn't have the ability to protect herself. Besides, there was a demonic beast riot right now. Saving her life was the most important thing. With this thought in mind, Xianxia stood up and carefully observed this virtual sky world. Obviously, each virtual sky world was different. Zhong Muling's was a wooden hut and a pond, while this one was a bamboo hut and a bamboo forest and a brook. However, the spiritual aura was almost the same, and they were both very dense. In addition, her virtual sky world had another advantage over Zhong Muling's. The spiritual plants here were densely packed and had been growing freely for at least hundreds of thousands of years. Among them, there were countless 10,000-year-old spiritual plants that multiplied, squeezing the medicinal field to the point where there was almost no space to stand. Zhong Muling's virtual sky world, on the other hand, didn't have so many spiritual plants. Perhaps it was because he had been in the deification realm for thousands of years and had already used or collected some of the spiritual plants. Looking at the endless medicinal field under the breeze, Xianxia couldn't help but think that she had no choice but to practice pill concocting now. Most of these spiritual plants couldn't be taken outside. If she wanted to use them, she could only concoct them herself. Moreover, with so many spiritual plants, would she still need to worry about not having enough talent in pill concocting? Moreover, she could also collect as many ancient pill recipes as possible. In the current cultivation world, although ancient pill recipes still existed, most of them were useless because most of the spiritual plants had long disappeared from the world. Even if she had the pill recipes, she wouldn't be able to concoct spiritual medicines. But she didn't need to worry about this problem. There were so many spiritual plants here, which should have been planted by the former master of this virtual sky world. There must be spiritual plants commonly used in pill concocting. Even if some were missing, it would be enough for her to concoct several kinds of ancient medicinal pills. Thinking up to this point, Xianxia couldn't help but laugh. For the first time, she felt that her cultivation path would be a bright one. Chapter 118. Next, Emotienga heard several shocking pieces of news. First of all, the cultivators on Luoyan Cliff were about to disperse. Because the demonic beasts repeatedly failed to break through, the smart high-level demonic beasts scattered and destroyed everything around them. They had no choice but to split up and hunt. Second, there was news from East Kunwu that Danding School didn't have time to activate all the great mountain-protecting formation before it was breached by a 9th-rank demonic beast. They lost a lot of disciples and came to ask for help. Finally, it was said that Martial Uncle Shoujing was seriously injured and couldn't hold on anymore, so he had to return to Mount Taikong to recuperate. Upon hearing the first two pieces of news, Emotienga finally realized that the demonic beast riot was so serious that even a 9th-rank demonic beast appeared, which was equivalent to a cultivator in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. The last piece of news gave her a strange feeling, and a thought flashed through her mind. But before she could think too much about it, Martial Uncle Xianyin informed her that they had another important task and that she and Luo Fengxue should immediately follow him to Danding School. Emotienga didn't expect that the task of supporting Danding School would fall on them, so she felt a bit nervous. Luo Fengxue secretly told her that after Danding School was attacked, many cultivation groups would send people to support them, so the demonic beasts wouldn't dare to continue attacking, so they would be safe. Emotienga thought it made sense. Besides, Danding School originally had a nascent soul cultivator, and it was only breached by accident. But since the day she came out of the virtual sky world, she didn't have a chance to enter again. Luo Fengxue stayed with her all the way. Although she had a good relationship with Luo Fengxue, the virtual sky world was, after all, a heaven-defying magic weapon, so she decided not to tell anyone. Nevertheless, the next step was to hurry on with their journey, so it wasn't a waste of time. Danding School was located in the central part of West Kunwu, not far from Xianxia School. It would only take 3 to 5 days to get there from Luoyan Cliff on a core formation cultivator's flying magic weapon. Several days later, Martial Uncle Xianyin led the group of foundation building disciples to Mount Tianhua of Danding School. Emotienga saw a towering mountain from afar, and the volcano at the peak was emitting hot underground fire. Reportedly, the reason why Danding School was established here was precisely because this was the largest volcano in Kunwu. It must be known that in addition to concocting techniques, concocting fire was also extremely important. Aside from Dantian fire, earth vein fire was also an excellent concocting fire. Especially high-grade earth vein fire, it could almost compare to sun real fire and was much better than the Dantian fire of low-level cultivators. The reason why this Skyfire volcano was called the Skyfire Mountain was said to be because the earth vein fire here was of extremely high quality. Red flames shot out of the volcano from time to time, attracting the attention of many disciples. In the middle of the volcano, there was a huge green cauldron floating in the air. This was the symbol of the Pill Cauldron School. All the disciples of the ordinary Pill Cauldron School had this symbol on their clothes. However, from afar, they noticed that the Pill Cauldron School had suffered serious damage. The lofty mountain gate had already collapsed, and several of the houses surrounding the volcano had collapsed. The square was filled with broken bricks and broken jades. Danding School disciples dressed in black clothes were walking back and forth. There were also a lot of cultivators dressed in the clothes of other cultivation groups busying themselves. Emotienga looked around. Most of them were aura refining cultivators, and a few were foundation building cultivators. There wasn't even a single core formation cultivator among them. This wasn't strange at all. Aura refining disciples were the most numerous disciples in cultivation groups. If Xianxia School hadn't closed its mountain gate, they would have definitely sent aura refining disciples led by foundation building cultivators. As for core formation cultivators, there weren't many core formation cultivators in small and medium-sized cultivation groups. They weren't even strong enough to protect their own cultivation groups and clans, so why would they send them to support other cultivation groups? Only Xianxia School, which had closed its mountain gate a long time ago, could afford to send so many core formation cultivators. Before they reached Danding School's great mountain-protecting formation, a flight light rose from Mount Skyfire. Soon after, the great mountain-protecting formation was opened. A core formation female cultivator led several disciples to welcome the newcomer. Senior martial brother Xianyin, we're honored by your presence. Master Daoist Xianyin cupped his hands in greeting and said with a smile, Junior martial sister Mo, there's no need to be so polite. This is what I should do. The female cultivator shook her head and said with a bitter smile, everyone else is busy taking care of themselves. Only your Xianxia school sent a core formation cultivator. Senior martial brother Xianyin, to tell you the truth, we're currently lacking high-level cultivators. We're really grateful that you came. Master Daoist Xianyin still had a faint smile on his face. Our cultivation groups are friends, so we should help each other. Junior martial sister Mo, you don't have to do this. By the way, how's the current situation? Alas, the situation isn't good. Senior martial brother Xianyin, please come with me. After he said that, he turned to the foundation building disciples behind him and said, take care of the martial nephews and nephews of Xianxia school. Don't neglect them. Yes, master. The female cultivator led Master Daoist Xianyin to the main hall while Mo Tiange and the other foundation building disciples were arranged to live in temporary Immortal's caves by the other reception disciples. Because there were a lot of cultivators coming, Shi, Luo Fengxue, Han Qingyu, Wei Jiasi, and the others were arranged to live together. Mo Tiange looked around the temporary Immortal's caves and was very happy because there was a concocting room inside. She could use the earthly fire to enter the room, so she could practice her pill concocting skills here temporarily. In addition, this was Danding School, so there were naturally many pill recipes here. Thus, she found an opportunity to come out with Luo Fengxue. Tiange, if you want pill recipes, you can ask Master. Our Xianxia school also has a lot of pill recipes. Faced with Luo Fengshue's question, Mo Tiange answered, Senior martial sister Luo, once I do something, I'm single-minded. Now that I'm learning pill concocting, I really want to collect as many pill recipes as possible. Although our Xianxia school certainly has a lot of pill recipes, Danding School is a cultivation group famous for its pill concocting, so there must be something special about it. Maybe we can find something good. You're right. Although they had just gone through a disaster, the market square inside Danding School was still open as usual. Because many disciples were injured and many magic tools, spiritual talismans, and so on were lost, the market square was still very lively. Mo Tiange had already asked Danding School disciples about it, so she didn't stroll around and directly pulled Luo Fengxue into a shop. Hey, martial uncles of Xianxia School, please come in. As soon as they entered, the shop assistant greeted them enthusiastically. Probably because there had been a lot of disciples from his school coming here recently, he skillfully recognized their clothes and quickly brought them tea. Martial uncles, do you have any instructions? Mo Tiange had never been treated so warmly before she even said anything, so she felt a bit uncomfortable. Luo Fengxue, on the other hand, was very calm. She had been an elite disciple since she was a child and was also a steward. What kind of flattery hadn't she seen before? This kind of treatment was a matter of course. Seeing that Mo Tiange didn't say anything, Luo Fengxue took over the conversation. Do you have any good things here? We want to buy some in preparation for exterminating demons. Upon hearing this, the shop assistant's smile became even brighter. Martial uncles, to thank you for your assistance, the sect head issued an order a few days ago to give all shops in our school a 20% discount. We have everything you want in our shop: magic tools, spiritual talismans, medicinal pills. As long as you need it, you can find it. Oh? There's no need for magic tools since we won't be using them for the time being. You can just give us spiritual talismans and medicinal pills. Spiritual plants are also fine, but they have to be at least 200 years old. Please wait here for a moment. After the shop assistant left, Luo Fengxue smiled and said, this is a good opportunity. Danding School has a lot of good medicinal materials that we can't usually see. 20% discount. Let's buy as much as we want. With the virtual sky world, Mo Tiange didn't care about these common spiritual plants, but she still nodded with a smile. The shop assistant moved very quickly. In a short moment, he came back with a cloth bag. This cloth bag was also a kind of Qianquan bag, but it had a small capacity and was extremely cheap. Shops usually used it to move goods. The shop assistant laid out the items on the table one by one and said with a smile, "Martial uncles, please take a look. These are foundation-building realm spiritual talismans made by our school's core formation elders. Originally, this small shop was just keeping up appearances, but now that we urgently need spiritual talismans, we took them all out." Tiange picked up a talisman. Sure enough, it was a high-grade rustling falling wood talisman. There were also several world of ice and snow, sword light flickering shadow, and so on. The talismans were enshrouded in dense spiritual aura. They were made from the skin and blood of 3rd or 4th rank spiritual beasts instead of ordinary talisman paper and cinnabar. These are several special magic tools. They don't need to be refined, so maybe martial uncles will take a liking to them. The shop assistant opened a jade box. Inside were several dozens of glittering and translucent flying needles arranged neatly. Tiange picked one up and saw that it was as thin as a feather. She couldn't sense any spiritual aura, but she could still feel the spiritual aura sealed on the tip of the needle. And here are the spiritual plants. Martial uncles, if you have any specific needs, please don't hesitate to tell us. The other things in Danding School's inventory might not be great, but the spiritual plants we have are among the best in the celestial pole. As they listened to the shop assistant's proud introduction, Tiange and Luo Fengxue lowered their heads to examine the items. Sure enough, snow chestnut flower, purple slough grass, blue pearl jade, snow rasher mushroom. These were all relatively rare spiritual plants, and the ones on the table were all more than 200 years old. Tiange and Luo Fengxue glanced at each other. "Senior martial sister Luo, what do you think?" Luo Fengxue smiled. "Why don't we buy them together? In the future, whoever needs them can split them." Tiange nodded, then said to the shop assistant, "We want all these spiritual plants. You can calculate how many spirit stones we'll need." The shop assistant looked astonished. Even though these rare spiritual plants weren't very old, they still cost a lot of money. Moreover, there were at least 10 of them here, so no matter what, it would still cost 5,000 to 6,000 spirit stones. That many spirit stones was a huge fortune. Ordinary foundation building cultivators' annual rations were only about 1,000 spirit stones at most. However, he quickly regained his composure. After a simple count, he answered, "Martial uncles, there are a total of 5,760 spirit stones here. After a 20% discount, it'll be 4,608 spirit stones. Let's just erase the number and count it as 4,600 spirit stones." "All right, you can pack them up," Luo Fengxue instructed him. She then asked Tiange, "I only want these spiritual plants. What else do you want?" Tiange muttered to herself for a while, then pointed at the flying needle-like magic tool. When she fought for foundation building pills in Yunwu sect, she once obtained a handful of flying needles from Murongzi. However, the more she used them, the fewer they became. Moreover, she was already in the foundation building realm, so they were no longer of much use. These things were indeed good for sneak attacks. Keeping some of them on her could be used in case of emergencies. By the way, Tiange said after the shop assistant packed up all the things and collected the spirit stones from Luo Fengxue, pretending to ask casually, "This is Danding School's shop. Are there any good pill recipes for sale?" The shop assistant immediately answered, "Of course. Our Danding School is most outstanding in pill concocting. We have both ordinary pill recipes and some rare pill recipes. However, it depends on what kind of pill recipes Martial Uncle wants. We can't sell some special pill recipes. The sect's core formation grandmasters have to make the decision." As the #1 pill concocting group, Danding School naturally had some unique skills that outsiders didn't have. Tiange wasn't surprised by his answer and asked, "What about ancient pill recipes?" "Ancient pill recipes?" The shop assistant was startled and asked, "Martial Uncle, why do you want ancient pill recipes?" Many of the spiritual plants in ancient pill recipes have been lost, so they naturally lost their value. Xianxia had long thought of an excuse, so she simply said faintly, "I've done some research on the Tao of pill concocting. Some ancient medicinal pills have excellent medicinal properties, so I want to use ordinary medicinal plants as replacements to see if I can refine them into medicinal pills." "Oh, so Martial Uncle is also a kindred spirit." A smile blossomed on the shop assistant's face. His attitude towards Xianxia became a bit more cordial. He said, "This isn't a big deal. Our school is also studying it." Pill recipes can also be sold to outsiders, but the price is slightly higher. Xianxia said, "This isn't a big deal. If they're good, just bring them to me." Chapter 119. He received several pill formulas from Danding School. There was a spirit-gathering pill suitable for foundation-building cultivators, a clear sky pill suitable for core formation cultivators, an aura-stabilizing pill, a look-preserving pill, and even a longevity pill. The effects of the essence-gathering pill seemed ordinary. It was just a common pill for foundation establishment cultivators to take to increase their cultivation, but in reality, the effects of the ancient pill recipe couldn't be compared to the essence-enhancing pill of today. The same principle applied to the Azure Cloud pill. As for aura-stabilizing pills, look-preserving pills, and longevity pills, aura-stabilizing pills were good medicine for adjusting spiritual aura and were most suitable for people who had just experienced spiritual aura deviation. Although Xianxia wouldn't be in danger of experiencing spiritual aura deviation in the future, it was still extremely useful when she made a realm breakthrough. As for the looking-preserving pill and the longevity pill, although they had the same names and effects, their medicinal effects were different. The current looking-preserving pill could only preserve one's appearance for 10 years, while the looking-preserving pill could preserve one's youth forever. The longevity pill was the same. It didn't extend one's lifespan by 100 years, but rather, by 500 years. Forget about the other medicinal pills. This longevity pill's medicinal effects were too shocking. It could increase a core formation cultivator's lifespan by 500 years. It was enough for a core formation cultivator to advance from the core formation stage to the nascent soul stage. Perhaps it could even allow a nascent soul cultivator to reach the soul formation stage. Now, even the immortality elixir with a 100-year medicinal effect was something that only nascent soul cultivators could obtain. She sighed inwardly. If Second Uncle had known that she had a rare treasure when he was still alive, how could he have let Second Uncle die with hatred? Moreover, ever since she obtained the virtual sky world, it was as if the hundreds of thousands of years of time the virtual sky world had experienced flowed into her memory in an instant. She clearly remembered every kind of spiritual plant inside, so when she chose pill recipes, she chose all kinds of spiritual plants. Luo Fengxue didn't know about this. She only knew Xianxia spent a lot of money to buy useless pill recipes, so she kept muttering about it on the way back. However, she had been a disciple of a famous school since she was a child and her master was fond of her. Her family was even richer than Xianxia's, so she didn't think a few thousand spirit stones was a big deal. She grumbled for a while, but seeing that Xianxia didn't care, she no longer said anything. Right after the two of them entered the temporary Immortal's cave, they saw Han Qingyu and Wei Jiasi sitting together in the living room. They seemed to be waiting for them. Upon seeing them, Han Qingyu said happily, "You're finally back. Hurry up, we're about to set off." "What?" Luo Fengxue asked in confusion. "Eldest martial sister, where are we going?" Han Qingyu said, "We didn't come to Danding School to play around. After resting for a few days, it's time for us to go kill monsters." Oh, that was true. Currently, many of Danding School's disciples had died. If they, as reinforcements, just sat there and played, it wouldn't be right. The few of them did not have anything to prepare. They were not mortals. All of their belongings were kept in their cosmos sacks. They could just leave. 15 minutes later, under Han Qingyu's lead, the four of them left Mount Heaven Volcano. While they were shopping, Master Daoist Xianyin assigned them a task. He told Han Qingyu and Wei Jiasi to wait for them to come back before they set off. On the way, Han Qingyu briefly explained their mission. As it turned out, there were low-rank demonic beasts roaming in the vicinity of their clan's territory. Their clan couldn't hold on any longer, so they were asked to go and provide reinforcements. The 4 of them were foundation-building cultivators, so they could already be considered high-level cultivators in Danding School. Although Danding School was one of the 7 great cultivation groups, it couldn't compare to Tiandao Sect or Xianxia School. They were good at pill concocting, but their cultivation levels were relatively ordinary. The number of people in their school was only slightly more than that of medium-sized cultivation groups. Now that they had suffered disastrous losses, they couldn't provide more foundation-building cultivators. However, demonic beasts were mostly in the 1st or 2nd rank. Demonic beasts in the 4th rank and above were rarely seen. Therefore, the 4 of them, together with the cultivators from their clans, weren't in too much danger. Half a day later, they finally arrived at the branch of Mount Heaven volcano. The 4 of them watched from afar as a group of patrolling cultivators flew towards them. This group of patrolling cultivators was also composed of aura-refining cultivators and was led by a foundation-building cultivator. The foundation-building cultivator leading the group was only in the early stage of the foundation-building realm. His hair was half white and he looked like an old man. Obviously, he didn't have much time left in his life. In cultivation clans that relied on cultivation groups, the young and talented cultivators would usually stay in their groups. Only those who didn't have much time left in their lives and had no hope of making a realm breakthrough would return to their clans to train their descendants. As the cultivator flew closer, he looked at them cautiously. After carefully sizing them up, he cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Daoists, may I ask who you are?" Han Qingyu showed a faint smile and took out an identity tablet. "Fellow Daoists, we're disciples of Xianxia School. We were ordered to assist Danding School, so we've come to assist you." The old man took the identity tablet. After verifying it, his expression changed from cautiousness to pleasant surprise. He approached them and bowed repeatedly. "Fellow Daoists from Xianxia School, this matter is of great importance. I'm really sorry for offending you just now. I'm a cultivator from Yu clan. I'll report to the clan head and come to welcome you. Please wait here for a moment." Han Qingyu made an inviting gesture. The cultivator then took out a summoning talisman and whispered a few words. The summoning talisman then turned into a beam of light and flew towards the house below. As the summoning talisman disappeared, several flight lights immediately rose from below. When they came closer, Emotienga could clearly see that they were a middle-aged cultivator, a beautiful young woman, and an old man. The middle-aged cultivator's cultivation level was the highest among them. He was in the middle stage of the foundation-building realm. He had long hair and a black beard. He was dressed in a Cosmos Daoist robe and looked very dignified. Both the young woman and the old man were in the early stage of the foundation-building realm. The young woman was gentle and demure while the old man looked ordinary. As soon as the 3 of them came closer, the middle-aged cultivator smiled and said from afar, "Fairies, we're honored by your presence. I didn't go out to welcome you. Please don't take offense." Fairies. Emotienga felt a bit dizzy when she heard this form of address. She knew female cultivators were sometimes called fairies, but in general, mortals called them that. The path to immortality had nothing to do with men and women, so they still addressed each other as fellow Daoists. This middle-aged cultivator called them fairies as soon as they met to show his respect. However, Emotienga really wasn't used to it. Han Qingyu remained calm and said with a smile, "Fellow Daoist, please don't be so polite. We're both cultivators, so you can just call us fellow Daoist." Seeing that she was behaving appropriately, the middle-aged cultivator knew they weren't proud and arrogant female cultivators, so he also smiled and said, "Fellow Daoist, you're right. I'll do as you say. Oh, I'm Yu Jingfeng, the clan head of Yu clan. This is my wife, and this is my clan brother, Hai." The cultivator pointed at the 2 people next to him. The young woman and the old man saluted him together. After they finished saluting him, he asked with a smile, "May I know fellow Daoists' names?" Emotienga and the others returned the salute before Han Qingyu answered, "I'm Han Qingyu from Xianxia School." These are my junior martial sisters, Wei Jiasi, Luo Fengxue, and Imo Tiange. So it's fellow Daoist Han, fellow Daoist Wei, fellow Daoist Luo, and fellow Daoist Imo. Fellow Daoists, you're all so young, but your cultivation levels are already high. You're truly admirable. Han Qingyu smiled gracefully and said, Clan head Yu, please don't be so polite. Among us martial sisters, my two junior martial sisters are worthy of this praise. Junior martial sister Wei and I, on the other hand, are already over 100 years old, so we're nothing. Most female cultivators used cultivation techniques to preserve their youthful looks. Even if they didn't, they would still take look-preserving pills. Because of this, both Han Qingyu and Wei Jiasi looked like they were in their early 20s. Furthermore, one of them was in the middle stage of the foundation-building realm, while the other was in the late stage of the foundation-building realm. Based on their lifespans, they looked to be in their 30s at most. Han Qingyu's words were actually quite modest. Clan head Yu was a quick-witted person. Once he heard Han Qingyu's words, he immediately waved his hand and said, Hey, fellow Daoist Han is too polite. Even if you and fellow Daoist Wei are already over 100 years old, your future prospects are still boundless. Fellow Daoist Han is already in the late stage of the foundation-building realm, and he's also the descendant of a famous cultivation group. Maybe one day he'll form his gold core. He'll truly be a talented young man. I wouldn't dare. Between the two of them, one was praising her while the other was being modest, making Imo Tiange feel very gloomy. Senior martial sister Han really had this much patience. If it were her, although she would also say a few polite words, she would definitely end the topic early. After talking for a quarter of an hour, the patrolling foundation-building cultivator had already gone back to his patrol. Before the two of them could finish talking, fortunately, Madame Yu, who was standing next to Clan Head Yu, saw an opportunity and interrupted their conversation. She said reproachfully, Husband, fellow Daoists have just arrived. Why don't you invite them inside to sit first? Clan Head Yu suddenly understood and said with a remorseful expression, You're right. I was too forgetful. Fortunately, Madam reminded me. Fellow Daoists, I'm sorry. Please come inside and take a seat. Han Qingyu smiled. With Clan Head Yu leading the way, the group of people landed in Yu Clan's courtyard. Clan Head Yu welcomed the four of them into the main hall. They sat down according to the order of the host and guests and ordered them to serve tea before they finally got down to business. To be honest, fellow Daoists, my Yu Clan's current situation isn't very good. You're all disciples of famous sects, so you should be able to see that my Yu Clan's defensive formation can't be considered top-notch. Moreover, we only have 4 foundation-building cultivators. We're from a small sect, and our magic tools and medicinal pills aren't good either. When the demonic beasts attacked last time, my clan elder brother was injured. My wife and I also destroyed our magic tools, so we had no choice but to ask the sect for help. Fortunately, you came in time. Han Qingyu didn't act modest this time. She pondered for a moment then asked, Clan Head Yu, how's your current fighting strength? Fellow Daoist Hai Tao is injured, so let's not count for now. Do you and Madame Yu still have any means to defend against the enemy? Clan Head Yu nodded. He stroked his beard and muttered to himself for a moment before answering, Although Madame and I destroyed our magic tools, we still have other means. Now, we won't have any problems fighting demonic beasts of the same rank. My clan elder brother is old and injured, so he probably can't join the battle right away. Also, the one outside is my nephew. Although his cultivation level is lower than mine, he's very powerful in fights of magical power. His odds of winning against a demonic beast of a higher rank are slightly higher. Is that so? Han Qingyu originally didn't have much hope for Yu Clan, so she wasn't disappointed. Now, she shifted her gaze towards the three of them and asked, What do you think? Among the three of them, Wei Jiasi was the oldest, so she spoke first. Eldest martial sister, I don't think there's any problem. You and I can fight one against many. Fengxue and Tiange also have some means, so we won't have to worry about our safety in fights of magical power against demonic beasts of the same rank. Luo Fengxue said, Eldest martial sister, we can rearrange Yu Clan's cultivators. Maybe the aura-refining cultivators can also play a big role. Mo Tiange pondered for a long time before she finally said, I can rearrange Yu Clan's defensive formation. It should be able to increase its defensive power by half, as well as several means of attack. Han Qingyu nodded with a smile. This was also what she had thought of. Wei Jiaxi had always focused on fights of magical power, Luo Fengxue was good at management, and Mo Tiange was good at formations. The three of them all focused on different things. As for herself, she had always been the eldest martial sister, but she was good at leading people and making the final decision. The four of them had different characters, but they complemented each other, so Master Daoist Xianyin sent them out together. The three people from Yu Clan were pleasantly surprised to hear this. If that was the case, their arrival wouldn't just give Yu Clan 4 more foundation-building cultivators. Yu Clan could be saved now. Chapter 120. When they arrived at Yu Clan, the four of them were finally given separate rooms. Right now, they had no time to study pill concocting or cultivate, so Mo Tiange entered the virtual sky world. She only stayed for a moment and took out some books. Because she got the memories of the virtual sky world, Mo Tiange finally understood why she could enter the virtual sky world so easily. This virtual sky world must have been lost in the world. Many people must have tried to make it recognize them by blood, but only she succeeded. It was probably because of her spiritual roots of the origin. The virtual sky world was a thing from the distant past. The cultivation techniques of the distant past era were very different from those of the present era. Even though spiritual roots of the origin only appeared every few thousand years, everyone practiced the art of the origin. Therefore, people with spiritual power all had primal chaos inside their bodies. The virtual sky world was created at that time, and its principles were also similar to primal chaos. However, the art of the origin was lost, so people of the present era couldn't awaken the virtual sky world even if they dripped their blood on it. Mo Tiange guessed that in addition to Zhong Muling, there was another deification cultivator who had a virtual sky world. He must have used some special method to create primal chaos to make the virtual sky world recognize him as its master. There were traces left by the previous owner of the virtual sky world. Mo Tiange didn't know who that owner was. There were a lot of books, but unfortunately he didn't leave any magic weapons. Presumably, he carried those things with him and lost them when he died. However, that person must have been a person with great divine power. Mo Tiange found a notebook that recorded some of that person's reflections on cultivation, but she couldn't understand it at all. She knew it must be because her realm was too low. According to Yuan Bao, the great divine power of the distant past era wasn't something ordinary nascent soul cultivators could do. It was a realm above the deification realm they didn't know, because Zhong Muling's virtual sky world also had these miscellaneous things, which they couldn't understand with their realm. However, there were some simple books that shocked her. The art of alchemy, the art of talisman crafting, the art of crafting, the art of crafting, the art of setting up arrays, and even the art of mechanisms. Because she had the deepest understanding of arrays, she started learning the art of setting up arrays as soon as she could. There was a kind of illusory sky formation recorded in the book, which should be the formation Zhong Muling arranged outside his virtual sky world. The book described this formation as the formation of 10,000 images. With a single thought, 10,000 images would appear. The illusory formations Mo Tiange experienced were only two of the weakest ones. However, that was all she could understand. Her cultivation level also affected her ability to understand Dao, and Dao was divided into Yin and Yang and the 5 elements, which was the foundation of the formation. If her cultivation level was not high enough, she would not be able to go further. Even without the illusory sky formation, there were some simple formations recorded in it that were not something that could be compared to today's formations. The Yu clan's defensive formation was called the 4 Symbols Formation. Although it wasn't an ordinary formation, it wasn't a profound one either. Generally, only a few mid-level cultivation clans would use it. From these books, Mo Tiange also found the 4 Symbols Formation. However, the arrangement method was somewhat different from the one she used today, and its power was also much greater. In addition, there was also a kind of 4 symbols 100 flowers formation, which was a variation of the 4 symbols formation. It was based on the 4 symbols formation and combined with the arrangement method of another formation called the waxing and waning formation, making it a kind of compound formation. At one moment, there were 4 symbols, and at the other moment, there were hundreds of flowers. The 2 formations were completely unrelated, but they combined into one. It was basically impossible to break the formation with a single method. When Xianxia saw this kind of formation arrangement method, she was amazed by its master. The theory was really simple and could be understood with just a hint. However, before this, she never had this kind of idea. When demonic beasts cultivated to a high level, they would also develop intelligence, but 3rd and 4th rank demonic beasts still couldn't understand human speech. Their bodies were tyrannical, and they didn't have spiritual roots. Compared to human cultivators, their spiritual power was pure, so they had an advantage in fights of magical power. However, the external objects created by human cultivators relying on their intelligence were often superior to them, such as magic weapons, talismans, formations, and so on. Among these things, formations were the cheapest and most effective. After Xianxia said she wanted to rearrange Yu Clan's formation, the patriarch of Yu Clan, who was a smart person, was very enthusiastic towards her and even sent many cultivators to help her. However, Xianxia drove all those people back. It wasn't that she was afraid of leaking the secret, but rather that these aura-refining cultivators would only be a hindrance to her. It was better for her to arrange the formation herself. Aside from formation discs, formation flags, and spirit stones, there were also some specific spiritual beasts, spiritual plants, or spiritual objects. The reason why Xianxia directly chose to modify the 4 symbols formation was because this was the original formation, so it was convenient to modify it. The second reason was because the materials needed for this formation were simple, only a kind of spiritual wood which could be found in the virtual sky world. Xianxia spent a whole day to thoroughly understand the 4 symbols formation. After that, she spent only an hour to finish laying the formation. She then easily finished her work. Reportedly, Yu Clan had 2 young cultivators in Danding School. Patriarch Yu actually ate a look-preserving pill, which was why he was so young. As for Madame Yu, she wasn't young anymore. Among the 4 of them, the youngest only had a lifespan of 100 years. None of them had advanced to the late stage, so they simply came back to wholeheartedly cultivate their descendants. Although the cultivation levels of these 4 people were ordinary, they had good foresight. Yu Clan's cultivators also had a good foundation. Unfortunately, they obviously couldn't compare to Xianxia School's elite disciples. They couldn't even compare to the ordinary disciples of Clear Spring Peak, which made Luo Fengxue both angry and anxious. Xianxia sat leisurely on the side, reading a formation book while watching Luo Fengxue angrily scolding the Yu Clan disciples. "Hey, do you know how to use talismans?" "Senior, I'm only in the first layer of the aura refining realm." "You're still a cultivator in the first layer of the aura refining realm. You're a cultivator, but you actually don't know how to use talismans. How shameful. Go to the side and watch me." Thus, she made a pose to draw a talisman paper and demonstrated in a very natural and unrestrained manner. "Do you know how?" That boy, who was only 14 or 15 years old, stared at Luo Fengxue in fear. Luo Fengxue was enraged by his stare. "You still don't know how?" "Senior," the boy cried, "I'll slowly learn. Don't tell me to move things, I'll be laughed at." Moving things was a mortal's job. In the past 2 days, Luo Fengxue had reorganized all the people in Yu Clan. The mortals did chores while the cultivators practiced several kinds of simple formations and some fighting techniques. Luo Fengxue was used to doing these things, so her movements were extremely fast. It only took her 1 day to have everyone return to their respective positions. When the child cried, Luo Fengxue's anger was somewhat suppressed. She had always been popular in the school. In addition to her high status, she also had a good character. Even if ordinary disciples needed her help, she would help them if she could. Therefore, when she saw this child looking at her pitifully, her heart softened. You come here. Luo Fengxue called a cultivator in the third layer of the aura refining realm who was already in his 30s. She then pointed at the boy and said, "Teach him how to use talismans." That cultivator obediently walked towards her. He was also trembling with fear and cautiously answered, "Yes." Thus, like this, the older cultivator explained in detail how to use talismans bit by bit while Luo Fengxue added a few more sentences. An hour later, the boy cried out, "Senior, please let me move the things." Luo Fengxue couldn't breathe. She was so angry that she almost blacked out. At that moment, Tienge couldn't bear it anymore. She covered her mouth and giggled. Luo Fengxue heard the muffled laughter. She turned around with a murderous look, but when she saw it was Tienge, she immediately froze. After ordering the more outstanding aura-refining cultivators to continue teaching, Luo Fengxue weakly sat next to her. Tienge stopped laughing and earnestly comforted her. "That's enough. These cultivators don't even have the qualifications to enter the school, so it's obvious what kind of talents they are. You're asking too much of them by using the standards of our school's disciples." Luo Fengxue shouted, "Ask them? I'm not asking them at all, okay? Not to mention the elite disciples. Even if ordinary disciples of Xianxia School were to line up in a formation and use their own methods, it wouldn't be a problem for several aura-refining disciples to fight against a second-rank demonic beast. But look at them, what did I ask for? I asked them to stand in their positions and use whatever they should use, but they actually don't even know how to use talismans." She paused for a moment, then turned around angrily. "Tell me, have you ever heard of a cultivator who doesn't even know how to use talismans? They don't need any techniques." Tienge sighed. "I've seen them." Luo Fengxue originally wanted to express her anger, but once she heard Tienge's serious answer, she was stunned. "There really are?" Tienge nodded and said, "In the past, I wandered the world with second uncle. What haven't we seen? Cultivation clans are getting worse and worse with each generation. There are many examples. Some clans' children not only have mixed spiritual roots, but they're also very weak. Even if we let them cultivate, it's still better than nothing. Some people are trapped in the first layer of the aura-refining realm their whole lives, and some people's intelligence is the same as ordinary people's or even worse. That's how our Yi clan declined." Luo Fengxue was speechless. She was found by Master Daoist Xianyin from the secular world. Because her spiritual roots were excellent, she was directly taken to Mount Taikang and accepted as an inner disciple, so she didn't know much about cultivation clans. "Forget it, just do whatever you want. When the time comes, it'll be fine as long as they can deal with first-rank demonic beasts. We'll take care of the rest. You don't need to worry too much. Senior Martial Sister Han will make arrangements. In the end, won't they still have to rely on us? It's already not bad if these aura-refining cultivators can protect themselves. I just hope we don't have to be distracted to protect them, but they're like this. All right, I admit I can't play a role in this matter." Tienge smiled. Luo Fengshue's dejected appearance was really rare. "Didn't you already understand this? Everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. Fighting and brawling aren't your strong points. You'd better leave these things to them and make preparations on your own." "And you're right." Luo Fengxue pondered for a moment, then cast aside her unhappy mood. "Right, do you still have a lot of talismans? I've already used up most of them. Eldest Martial Sister gave me some, but it's still not enough." Tienge knew Luo Fengxue didn't have enough time to sacrifice and refine magic tools, so she needed talismans more than the others. She made a rough inventory in her mind, then took out a stack of talismans. "I have a lot here. These were given to me by Martial Uncle. There's also this." Upon seeing the talismans Tienge took out, Luo Fengxue cheered. The two of them began to divide the talismans among themselves. "Oh, Tienge, these talismans are so strange. They don't seem to be made by Master, and they look very powerful. They couldn't have been bought outside, right? Where did they come from?" Tienge took a look. They came from the Qianquan bag Zhong Muling gave her. Talismans made by deification cultivators, even if they deliberately lowered their realm requirements, still weren't simple goods. Is it inconvenient to say? No, Emotienga said. They were given to me by martial uncle Shoujing. Luo Fengxue, who was looking through the talismans, was startled. She raised her head and stared at Emotienga blankly. Emotienga's expression was the same as usual, but there was a hint of obscurity in her gaze. Chapter 121. Emotienga stood on top of the mountain peak, staring at the dense forest below the cliff with a slight frown on her face. Things were a little troublesome. When they came that day, the Yu clan said that there was a group of demonic beasts in the vicinity and that they had fought with them a few days ago. At that time, the demonic beasts had almost destroyed the Yu clan's defensive formation, and it was estimated that they would return in a few days. From then on, she and Luo Fengxue stayed in Yu clan to prepare for the upcoming battle. As for Han Qingyu and Wei Jiasi, their two senior martial sisters, they kept in touch with Yu clan to investigate the demonic beasts situation. The movements of these monster beasts were exactly as the Yu clan had said. They seemed to be monitoring them, but they also seemed to be neither close nor distant. Sometimes it seemed as if they were about to attack, and sometimes it seemed as if they were about to retreat. There were too many mortals and low-level cultivators in Yu clan. Han Qingyu thought it would be better if they didn't take the initiative to attack. Otherwise, the ones who attacked would have to fight alone, and the ones who stayed behind wouldn't have enough strength and would fall into the enemy's scheme. Wei Jiasi actually didn't think a low-ranked demonic beast could have such intelligence, but Han Qingyu said it was better to be safe than sorry. They had come to battle to protect the Yu family. It would be better if they could kill the demonic beasts, but the safety of the Yu family was more important. However, in the following days, these demonic beasts did not attack again. Emotienga had already modified Yu clan's defensive formation, so she didn't think demonic beasts would be able to enter. However, the problem now was that demonic beasts were eyeing them covetously from the side and they couldn't solve the problem. This feeling was too unbearable. Moreover, they were ordered to assist, so how could they be delayed here? Today was her turn to patrol. Now that she was standing on the mountain peak, she discovered the aura of demonic beasts. The aura wasn't very strong, but it was very dense, and it was extremely close. She hesitated for a moment before taking out the summoning talisman and saying a few words. With a wave of her hand, the summoning talisman flew towards the Yu family's courtyard. Before long, a flight light rose from the Yu clan. Wei Jiasi rode her flying sword and approached them. She asked faintly, "What's the matter?" Wei Jiasi's attitude towards her couldn't be considered good, but Emotienga was already used to it. Emotienga also didn't think it was necessary for her to improve her relationship with Wei Jiasi, so she said faintly, "Senior martial sister Wei, look over there." It appeared again. Wei Jiasi turned around and stared for a while before she closed her eyes and released her divine sense. After a long time, she opened her eyes with a solemn expression. "Senior sister Wei, what should we do?" According to Emotienga's divine sense, there were at least 5 or 6 second-ranked demonic beasts in that area. Wei Jiasi wrinkled her brows and said, "Let's go take a look." Before she could get down from the flying sword, she immediately transformed into a flight light and flew towards the area filled with monster aura. Upon seeing this, Emotienga helplessly shook her head. She summoned a white silk handkerchief, then stepped onto it and followed closely behind Emotienga. He descended the mountain and flew into the forest. This white silk handkerchief was a gift from Zhong Muling. It was both a defensive magic weapon and a flying magic weapon. She still hadn't tested its defense function, but its flying ability was outstanding. It didn't require much spiritual aura, and it was fast and stable. With her experience, if she tried to escape, perhaps only a few foundation-building cultivators would be able to catch up to her. Besides, it's been some time since she built her foundation. Especially after the battle, she'd already taken some time to refine all those magic weapons and magic tools. Among them was the land-fleeing ruler. Even Zhong Muling praised it for its ingenuity. Even if she ran into something, she wouldn't be in any danger as long as she traveled 1,000 miles. However, Wei Jiaxi's expression was very unsightly at the moment. Her flying magic tool was just a flying sword. Although it was given to her by her master and was much better than ordinary flying swords, there was nothing special about it. After entering the forest, due to the terrain and environment, her flying speed was greatly reduced. Nevertheless, Tiange was steady and extremely agile from beginning to end. She had been in the foundation building realm for more than 80 years. Although she was still in the middle stage of the foundation building realm, her understanding of spiritual aura cultivation techniques wasn't something ordinary cultivators could compare to. Now, she was actually outclassed by Tiange. Although it was because of magic tools, she still felt bad. Once they entered the jungle, it was already the territory of the demonic beasts. In the past, there were only rank 1 demonic beasts, but now, there would occasionally be rank 2 and 3 demonic beasts appearing. But along the way, they didn't even see a single low-level demonic beast. "Hey, Senior Martial Sister Wei." Tiange suddenly stopped and called out. At this moment, Wei Jiaxi was a little angry. She shouted angrily, "What are you doing? The demonic aura has disappeared." Wei Jiaxi was stunned. He hurriedly sent out his divine sense, and sure enough, that was the case. Because Tiange was the one who reminded her about this kind of thing because of her desire to compare herself with Tiange, she felt even more humiliated and annoyed. "Even if it's gone, we should go to that place and see what's going on." Tiange shook her head inwardly when she heard Wei Jiaxi's harsh words. She then followed behind Wei Jiaxi and continued to walk towards their original destination. She already learned from Luo Fengxue why Wei Jiaxi hated her, but she didn't think she was wrong. In fact, when she thought about it carefully, she was actually quite disappointed in Wei Jiaxi. Senior Martial Sister Wei was so entangled in her emotions, yet she couldn't tell the reason. Even if Luo Fengxue managed to persuade her, it would most likely be very difficult for her to have any achievements in the future. This was the flaw in her character. After letting his imagination run wild for a while, the two arrived at their destination. As she slowly followed behind Wei Jiaxi, Tiange secretly took out the shuttle of flying Apsara and got off the white silk handkerchief. She held it in her hand and lightly stepped on the withered branches to move forward. Suddenly, she took a wrong step, her body floated up slightly and rolled to the side. At the same time, Wei Jiaxi turned around and leaped high into the air. A bolt of lightning exploded where they were. Tiange and Wei Jiaxi glanced at each other and saw the astonishment in each other's eyes. Someone who could hide their breath and had such a powerful spell that they couldn't find the location of the person who cast the spell. This opponent wasn't simple. She didn't seem like an ordinary 2nd or 3rd rank demonic beast. The two of them cautiously stood behind each other and took out their magic tools. Tiange's white silk handkerchief and shuttle of flying Apsara, one for defense and the other for offense. Wei Jiaxi took out several talismans and a small silver ring. Her water spirit flag was already destroyed, but she was still Master Daoist Xuanin's advanced inner disciple, so how could she be shabby? This Rui ring was also a powerful magic tool. The two of them used their divine senses to observe their surroundings. After an unknown amount of time, they suddenly made their moves at the same time. Wei Jiaxi threw the Rui ring, which collided with a bolt of lightning. As for Tiange, she threw the white silk handkerchief. The handkerchief immediately changed shape in midair, turning into bricks and stones which fell down with a plop, plop, plop sound. They formed a wall in front of her, blocking the lightning. The difference was that while Wei Jiaxi was forced back a step, Tiange didn't budge an inch. Wei Jiaxi cast another glance at Tiange. Her eyes were filled with astonishment. She could naturally see that Tiange had both magic tools and magic weapons. Magic tools were fine since magic weapons were naturally better than hers, but she didn't expect them to be this powerful. Based on her estimation, that bolt of lightning just now was much more powerful than a foundation building spell. Therefore, although she was strong, she was still forced back a step. Tiange, on the other hand, was unexpectedly so relaxed. A few days ago, Tiange, who had just entered the early stage of the foundation building realm, returned after disappearing for several days. But now, she, who had just entered the early stage of the foundation building realm, suddenly advanced to the middle stage of the foundation building realm. This naturally aroused the suspicions of her acquaintances. However, their masters also explicitly ordered them not to inquire about this matter, so no one asked too much. Nevertheless, everyone knew that Tiange must have encountered some kind of fated chance. This matter urged Wei Jiasi to cultivate even more diligently. However, although she had a deep understanding of fights of magical powers, she didn't expect that not only did Tiange's cultivation level advance, but she was also stronger than her in fights of magical powers. Chapter 122. Tiange didn't have time to care about Wei Jiasi's thoughts. She already had a vague idea where the lightning came from. She stretched out her right hand and the white silk handkerchief, which had turned into a brick wall, returned to her hand. She seemed to be attentively observing her surroundings, but the shuttle of flying Apsara in her other hand had already been quietly launched. The golden light flashed and disappeared. All of a sudden, Wei Jiasi heard a rumbling sound. She immediately turned around and saw Tiange sneering as she retrieved the shuttle of flying Apsara. Tiange said contemptuously, "You actually dared to show off this kind of low-grade formation in front of me." Before Wei Jiasi could say anything, the shuttle of flying Apsara was launched. In the blink of an eye, several places were broken one after another. Soon after, there was a lightning bolt that seemed to carry great anger and an astonishing momentum. Tiange shook her hand and launched the white silk handkerchief again. Wei Jiasi also turned sideways and launched her talisman and magic tool at the same time. One defended while the other attacked. A rumbling sound was the sound of the formation breaking. Tiange and Wei Jiasi glanced at each other when they saw what was inside the formation. Both of them saw the disbelief in each other's eyes. They indeed found the enemies, but the enemies were actually only two demonic beasts. These two demonic beasts were both in the shape of wolves. One was carrying the other on its back. The one standing on the ground was a fourth-rank demonic beast with a fierce gaze. The one lying on its back had short forelegs and couldn't walk, but it had a cunning gaze. The two wolves and the two humans confronted each other. Then Tiange heard Wei Jiasi whisper, "These are the two bedraggled demons." Tiange was shocked. Two bedraggled demons referred to two demonic beasts that could act together. There was a saying in the secular world called, "Wolves collude to commit evil." It referred to two kinds of wild beasts, wolves and bedraggled, cooperating to do bad things. These two bedraggled demons were also a wolf and a bedraggled demon, but they were already demonic beasts. Tiange suddenly understood. Other demonic beasts might need to be in the 8th rank or above to have the wisdom to use formations. However, demonic beasts like the bedraggled demon were born with intelligence. It relied on its wolf strength while Tiange provided its brain. The two demonic beasts relied on each other to hunt for food and cultivate. Among these two demonic beasts, the wolf was in the 4th rank while the bedraggled demon was only in the 2nd rank. However, this bedraggled demon could actually use a formation. Although it was an extremely simple spirit-concealing formation, it was still something that could only be done by demonic beasts that reached the 8th rank. Then, these days of misdirection were also the work of these two beasts? Given their strength, they shouldn't have provoked them like this. Tiange and Wei Jiasi didn't have much time to think. The wolf monster in front of them suddenly leaped up, and both Tiange and Wei Jiasi took out their magic tools. The shuttle of flying Apsara turned into a streak of golden light. The Rui ring shone with a cold silver light. In an instant, they collided with the lightning. Golden light, silver light, and lightning light intertwined, emitting a blinding light that almost blinded people. This wolf monster's cultivation level was in the 4th rank, which was equivalent to the late stage of the foundation building realm. Both Tiange and Wei Jiasi were in the middle stage of the foundation building realm, and they also had outstanding magic tools, so their chances of winning weren't small. At that moment, Wei Jiaxi raised her wrist and took out a talisman. The demonic wolf glared at her fiercely, then leaped away with a hunched back. The golden and silver light suddenly flourished, and the lightning was suppressed until it finally disappeared. Emotienga heaved a sigh of relief. Although the wolf monster wasn't a threat, the wolf monster's strength wasn't bad. At that moment, the bay let out several soft cries. Obviously, it was trying to tell the wolf something. However, Emotienga and Wei Jiaxi couldn't understand what it was saying, so they could only be vigilant. Senior Martial Sister Wei? Wei Jiaxi's gaze changed. In the end, she made up her mind and said, "Strike first and gain the upper hand." Emotienga understood what Wei Jiaxi meant. She shook her arm and took out the white silk handkerchief. At the same time, Wei Jiaxi also took out several magic tools and talismans. Together with Emotienga's shuttle of flying Apsara, they all flew towards the two hunched beasts. In a hurry, the wolf monster howled and opened its mouth, shooting out several lightning bolts. By the time the spiritual aura fluctuations stabilized, the two beasts had already fallen to the ground. Emotienga patted the dust off her body and walked towards the two beasts' corpses. "Oh!" Wei Jiaxi, who was slightly injured, asked, "What's wrong?" Emotienga turned over the two corpses and said, "Turns out they were injured. No wonder these two beasts deliberately laid a misleading formation here. They must have been left here by those demonic beasts, so they wanted to create the illusion that there were many demonic beasts here so they could secretly heal their injuries." Wei Jiaxi examined her own injuries and said, "Look around. This wolf monster isn't like other demonic beasts. Since it can use formations, maybe it has some kind of treasure." Sure enough, Emotienga found several pieces of wood-like objects. These things were also the tools the wolf monster used to lay the formation. She didn't know what they were, but they could actually replace formation discs and formation flags. There were also several crystalline minerals and spiritual plants. There was also a palm-sized, thin piece of jade. It was sparkling and translucent like a mirror. Emotienga didn't know what it was, but when she put it upright, it reflected a shadow. Moreover, the shadow seemed to be alive. "Senior Martial Sister Wei, take a look." Emotienga took the things back and handed them to Wei Jiaxi. Wei Jiaxi had lived nearly 100 years longer than Emotienga, so her knowledge was naturally far greater than Emotienga's. She took the things, examined them and said, "This is 7 phoenix wood, this is moon jadestone, and these spiritual plants are used to heal injuries. As for this," she lifted the jade and said doubtfully, "I can't recognize it." Oh, there were many spiritual objects in this world. Who could possibly recognize all of them? Emotienga thought for a moment then said, "Senior Martial Sister Wei, this 7 phoenix wood can be used to lay a formation. Can you give it to me? I don't want anything else." According to the names Wei Jiaxi mentioned, the other ores and spiritual plants were quite valuable. Although this 7 phoenix wood was rare, it was useless for people who couldn't lay formations. Wei Jiaxi didn't refuse. She nodded and said, "Since you want it, I'll give it to you." Emotienga was overjoyed and took it. As for this thing, Wei Jiaxi lifted the thin piece of jade and said with a frown, "It doesn't look like an ordinary thing. Let's take it back and let my master identify it." Just as the two of them were about to stand up, the jade suddenly flashed with a bright light. Wei Jiaxi was startled. She lifted the jade suspiciously, but she couldn't see any light. She muttered, "What's going on?" Emotienga naturally couldn't answer. She simply couldn't recognize this thing. The two of them saw the puzzled expression in each other's eyes. Suddenly, a bright light burst out from the jade. Before they could react, the light engulfed the two of them in an instant. Emotienga felt like she was dreaming, but she couldn't remember the content of the dream. She could only vaguely hear a voice. "Husband, what's wrong with Tienga?" It was a gentle female voice. At the same time, a pair of hands gently touched her forehead. "It's nothing." The male voice was also gentle. He said softly, "Tienga is too tired. She'll be fine once she wakes up." It was another bewildering dream. Many strange thoughts floated in her mind. One moment she was flying, The next moment she couldn't remember anything. Finally, she opened her eyes. Tiange, you're finally awake. A young married woman sitting by her bed showed a happy smile. Soon after, she called out, "Husband, husband." A refined man in his 30s entered the room and said with a smile, "Wife, I told you Tiange would be fine once she wakes up. Look, why are you so anxious?" Tiange stared at the man and woman in front of her. She seemed a bit confused, but she still obediently called out, "Father, mother, what's wrong with me?" The young married woman held her hand and said with a smile, "It's nothing. You can't be so naughty in the future. You actually climb trees to catch birds. It's fine for boys to do this kind of thing, but how can you be naughty like Tianjun?" "Mother, don't be angry. I won't do it in the future." The young married woman rebuked her by poking her forehead. "All right, mother will cook a bowl of noodles for you. Let your father teach you a lesson." Her mother went out with a smile. Her father walked over, picked her up, and put her forehead against his. "And your fever is gone. You should be fine now." She looked down at herself. Her thin body and small arms made her much shorter than her father when she stood on the bed. "Father, are you going to scold me?" "Of course not." Her father stroked her head, turned around, and crouched down. "Come here, father will take you. What's so fun about climbing trees? If you want a bird, father will catch it for you. And father is the best, better than eldest uncle and the others. Of course, sit tight." Her father imitated a cow's cry and ran out of the room with her on his back. Before she left the courtyard, she heard her mother shouting, "You too, don't run around." Her father turned around, mooed twice, and ran out of the courtyard with her on his back. Tiange clapped her hands and laughed loudly. "Father, quick, quick." She ran to the river in the east of the village, and her father put her down. "Tiange, stand here." "En." She nodded vigorously. Her father climbed up the oldest tree in the village and found the bird on the tree. "Tiange." Tiange looked up and saw her father holding the bird and raising his hand to her. She was so excited that her little face turned red. She shouted, "Father, I want it. I want it." Her father gently got down from the tree and put the bird in her hands. "Be careful, don't strangle the bird to death. You have to raise it well in the future. Since we caught it, the big bird doesn't want it anymore." She opened her eyes in confusion. "But because the bird has a human smell on it, so the big bird can't recognize it." "But..." She was stunned and shouted, "Father, take it back. I don't want the bird anymore. That won't do." Her father gently stroked her head. His expression was obviously filled with love, but it made her feel scared. "You already caught it. The big bird doesn't want it anymore. Chirp, chirp." She heard the birds chirping and looked up. She saw two big birds angrily chirping at her as if they knew she snatched the child away. "Oh no." She shouted loudly and spread out her hands holding the bird. "I'll give the bird back to you." The big birds were still chirping angrily, but they didn't fly down. They just flapped their wings and flew away. She held the bird, trembling all over. When she turned around, her father was also gone. The huge Mo's village was empty. There wasn't a single person, and it seemed like even the wind had stopped blowing. She looked down at the bird. They were all abandoned. The bird couldn't even chirp. It opened its tender beak, stood up shakily on her palm, and tilted its head to look at her. Its gaze was weak, pitiful, angry, and fierce. Suddenly, the bird that couldn't even spread its wings flew up and fiercely pecked at her eyes. Chapter 123. Xiaotian. Tiange woke up from her dream with a start and saw second uncle sitting next to her, looking at her with concern. "What's wrong?" She wiped the sweat from her forehead and shook her head. "I had a dream." Second uncle handed her a handkerchief. "Nightmare." Tiange was silent. She couldn't seem to remember what kind of dream she had. She just felt it was very scary. "All right, if you have nothing to do, go to the front and look after the shop. You can also stroll around other shops. Don't be bored." Second uncle went out. He seemed to be in good health. Tiange didn't know why she had such a thought. She shook her head in confusion and got up to wash up. This was a small market square in eastern Kunwu. She and second uncle opened a small shop here. They didn't make much money, but it was barely enough for uncle and nephew to cultivate. She cultivated diligently and was already in the 6th layer of the aura refining realm. She believed she would soon advance to the next realm. At that time, she would enter a cultivation group and diligently cultivate to advance, because second uncle, a foundation-building cultivator, had a fairly complete set of goods in this small shop. She only hired 2 low-level cultivators as assistants. She walked into the shop and saw the 2 assistants greeting customers diligently. Business seemed to be very good, so she went out. The street was very lively. She didn't know where so many people came from, but she felt a bit of a headache. She didn't know why, but she felt like she forgot something very important. He walked around the marketplace aimlessly, and before he knew it, he had returned to his own store. Before she entered, she heard noises. "Fellow Daoists, please wait. Our boss hasn't returned yet. This has nothing to do with us, nothing to do with you?" A fierce voice said, "You're from this shop, so you have something to do with it. Tell me, did your shop sell this illegal goods?" "Fellow Daoist, this thing doesn't have our shop's logo, so it shouldn't be. I said it's illegal, so how could it have a logo? You don't need to quibble. Take these things." Then the things on the counter fell over. Tiange rushed into the shop and saw the cultivators in charge of the market square rummaging around and snatching goods. She couldn't help but shout, "Stop!" The head steward's cultivation was not weak. He turned his head and coldly snorted, "Brat, it's none of my business. Move aside." She was furious. "This is my family's shop. How could it have nothing to do with me? What is the meaning of this? We pay the management fee in full every month. You are selling illegal goods and disrupting the order of the market. According to the rules, all the goods in the store will be confiscated." Tiange was stunned, but she soon sneered and said, "You casually took out something and said it was sold in our shop? Where's the proof?" The head steward sneered, "If I say so, then so be it. Take everything away." "How dare you?" Burning with anger, she raised her hand and summoned her greenwood sword. However, this was a group of cultivators whose cultivation levels were no lower than hers. Soon, she was knocked to the ground and could only watch helplessly as the shop was emptied. "Quick, be careful." The shop was empty. She was lying on the ground when she heard the voice again. Then, 2 people carried second uncle in. Second uncle's body was covered in blood, and he was on the verge of death. Second uncle, what's wrong? You're his nephew? He was injured by a lightning beast. I'm afraid he won't be able to hold on for long. My condolences." Second uncle. Tiange woke up from her dream again. Again? She sat on the bed in a daze. Why was it again? "You're awake?" She turned her head and saw the back of a person who seemed to be drawing talismans on the table. He was holding a brush and glancing at her from the corner of his eyes, but he was still focused on drawing. "Senior Martial Brother Qin?" She scratched her head, feeling like she had forgotten something. As she called out this name, a thought flashed across her mind. Is this really Senior Martial Brother Qin? But if it wasn't Qin Shi, who could it be? Tiange stood up and got off the bed. "Senior Martial Brother Qin, we should go." Qin Shi stood up. In an instant, he took her high into the sky. "Junior Martial Brother Yi, your second uncle has entrusted you to me." She couldn't say anything. She just felt that everything in front of her was wrong. When they arrived at Mount Taikong, Qin Shi landed with her. He turned around and said with a gentle smile, "Don't be afraid. With me here, I'll protect you. You should cultivate well. When you form your gold core one day, I'll tell Grandmaster and ask him to help us be together." "Help us be together?" "Yes, your second uncle has agreed to allow you to perform dual cultivation with me. When you form your gold core, he'll fulfill his promise." "Impossible." She was tongue-tied. "No, this is really wrong." Qin Shi was still affectionate. "Are you not willing?" Tiange turned her head and said in a low voice, This is absolutely impossible, Marshall. Uncle Qin. She didn't have the courage to look up, but she could feel spiritual aura fluctuations. In an instant, she dodged an attack. When she turned around, she saw Wei Jiaxi's distorted face, her eyes filled with anger. Senior Marshal Sister Wei. She shouted, "What are you doing?" Wei Jiaxi didn't seem to hear her. She sneered and clasped her hands, shooting a water arrow. Mo Tiange dodged in a sorry state. She turned to look at Qin Shi, hoping he could stop her. However, she saw Qin Shi smiling as if this matter didn't concern him. He was watching the two of them fight, but his smile didn't have the slightest warmth. It only made people feel terrified. Senior Marshal Sister Wei. Mo Tiange hastily wanted to take out her magic tool, but she realized her Qiankuan bag wasn't with her. She turned to look at Wei Jiaxi. She also didn't have a magic tool in her hand, but she was still fiercely attacking her. Senior Marshal Sister Wei, are you crazy? Wei Jiaxi stopped, but her gaze became even more terrifying. I knew I couldn't let you live. You want to snatch Marshal Uncle away? No, I absolutely won't let you. Mo Tiange suddenly felt a chill in her chest. She trembled, and a clear feeling emerged in her mind. No, this is really wrong. Qin Shi wouldn't say this kind of thing to her. He wouldn't tease his school's disciples with evil intentions. Senior Marshal Sister Wei also wouldn't take her life for personal gain. This is all fake. Mo Tiange felt a sharp pain in her head. She didn't have enough time to parry Wei Jiaxi's spell. She only felt pain in her arm, and the scene in front of her eyes was like ripples on water. They were in the vicinity of Danding School's Yu Clan, not Mount Taikong. Once she woke up from her hallucination, Mo Tiange immediately turned over to dodge Wei Jiaxi's attack. She used the white silk handkerchief to completely block Wei Jiaxi's attack. She then took out a beast-binding rope from her Qiankuan bag and easily tied up Wei Jiaxi, who had lost her mind and only knew how to use spells. Mo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief after she put away the white silk handkerchief. She looked around and found that the thin piece of jade had fallen on the ground. It had already broken into pieces. What was this thing? It could actually make her and Wei Jiaxi, two middle-stage foundation-building cultivators, hallucinate at the same time. Furthermore, every time she experienced it, it was ruthlessly torn apart when she thought it was beautiful. Was it also the same for Wei Jiaxi? So in the end, when they were in the same hallucination, Wei Jiaxi's spirit couldn't hold on anymore, so she attacked me? Mo Tiange suddenly felt a wave of lingering fear. If it wasn't for the fact that she could no longer suffer from cultivation deviation and that she had the spirit-concealing pendant that Zhong Muling had refined once again, perhaps she would have also, let me go. Wei Jiaxi's expression was terrifying. Her gaze was filled with hatred. Mo Tiange didn't know what she saw in Mo Tiange's hallucination. Mo Tiange stepped forward, took out a medicinal pill from her Qiankuan bag and threw it into Wei Jiaxi's mouth. Let me go. Wei Jiaxi closed her eyes and passed out. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment, then carefully put away some of the broken pieces of jade. She then helped Wei Jiaxi up and flew towards Yu Clan. On the way, she saw Luo Fengxue and a foundation-building cultivator from Yu Clan in the distance. The four of them then returned to Yu Clan together. After settling Wei Jiaxi down, Han Qingyu left the room. The moment the two people in the courtyard saw her, they both stared at her. Han Qingyu smiled and said, "It's nothing. Second junior martial sister is just tired. Let her rest. Once she wakes up, she'll be fine." Mo Tiange finally felt relieved. She asked, "Senior martial sister Han, what's going on? Why did senior martial sister Wei and I hallucinate when we saw that thing?" Han Qingyu shook her head. "I also don't know what that thing is. However, the number of spiritual objects in this world is beyond our imagination. That thing was also hidden by a demonic beast, so maybe it's from the southern forest. We don't know much about it." What Han Qingyu said wasn't unreasonable. Countless demonic beasts lived in the southern forest. There were some things that human cultivators were familiar with, but there were also some things that only the demonic beasts living there knew about. But this thing is miraculous. It's definitely not an ordinary thing. Unfortunately, it's broken. If it were still here, it would be great. Maybe it could be made into some kind of magic weapon. Upon hearing Luo Fengshue's words, Han Qingyu knocked her head and said with a smile, "This thing shattered as soon as it was used, so it can only be used once. So what if it's made into a magic weapon? You can stop dreaming." Luo Fengshue was startled. She then nodded and said, "You're right." "Enough." Han Qingyu said sternly, "Tienge, you're saying that when you and second junior martial sister went to investigate, you only found this wolf and this wolf, right? There weren't any other demonic beasts?" Mo Tienge nodded. "Correct. That wolf monster actually used a spirit-concealing formation, so sometimes we couldn't sense any spiritual aura fluctuations. After they died, I really couldn't sense any demonic aura. Furthermore, there were injuries on their corpses. I'm guessing they were injured and abandoned here by their original spiritual beasts. Since the wolf monster is intelligent, it was afraid its lonely demonic aura would be discovered by us, so it deliberately acted like this. What you said makes sense." Mo Tienge brought back the corpses of the two demonic beasts. Han Qingyu had also seen them, so she also made the same deduction. However, right now, she still felt it was a bit unreasonable. But why did the other demonic beasts retreat? Retreating as soon as we arrived isn't something demonic beasts would do. Even if the wolf monster was naturally intelligent, it still wouldn't make such a decision. Then senior martial sister Han means, Han Qingyu smiled. Her gaze deepened a bit. "I'm afraid there were high-level demonic beasts dispatching them from behind." Once she said that, Mo Tienge and Luo Fengshue glanced at each other. Their faces gradually paled because they both thought of one possibility: sending low-level demonic beasts to harass the nearby clans, forcing Danding School to send cultivators out, then launching a counterattack. Chapter 124. Eldest martial sister, what should we do? Luo Fengshue asked anxiously. Han Qingyu didn't say anything, but her expression was very calm. She looked at Wei Jiasi, who was lying on the bed, and made a decision. "Wake second martial sister up first." Luo Fengshue nodded repeatedly. Upon guessing the demonic beast's movements, Mo Tienge became anxious. Han Qingyu's decision suited her temperament. "Tienge, come and help." Han Qingyu and Luo Fengshue helped Wei Jiasi up from the bed. Han Qingyu raised her head and said, "Tienge, your cultivation level is also in the middle stage of the foundation building realm now. In a moment, let's pour our spiritual power into second junior martial sister's Dantian and Sea of Knowledge to wake her primordial spirit." "I understand." Mo Tienge nodded. She and Han Qingyu sat behind Wei Jiasi and listened to her orders. "I'll count to 3. Pour your spiritual energy into her Lingtai acupoint. In the beginning, the spiritual energy in her body will automatically resist. You have to hold on. I'll lend you a hand if I can free up my hands." "All right. Now 1, 2, 3. Right after she finished speaking, Mo Tienge immediately raised her hand, condensed her aura into her palm, and placed it on the Lingtai acupoint on Wei Jiasi's back. However, Han Qingyu directly pressed on her Baihui acupoint. "Fengshue, look after your second senior sister. If she can't hold on any longer, feed her a vitality pill." "Yes, eldest senior sister." Mo Tienge's spiritual aura had a pure yin attribute. It was ice-cold and light. After entering Wei Jiasi's body through Lingtai acupoint, Mo Tienge immediately sensed that her spiritual aura was rebounded by Wei Jiasi's meridians. This force was much stronger than hers. In fact, although the foundation building stage was classified differently from the qi condensation stage, which was generally divided into early stage, mid-stage, and late stage, these 3 minor stages were also divided into 9 levels. Levels 1, 2, 3 were early stage foundation building, 4, 5, 6 were mid-stage foundation building, and 7, 8, 9 were late-stage foundation building. The so-called completion of the foundational building stage was the 10th level, a step away from the core formation stage. Right now, Luo Fengshue had just advanced to the foundation building realm, so she was still in the first layer. Han Qingyu had also entered the late stage of the foundation building realm not too long ago, so she was still in the 7th layer. As for Mo Tiange and Wei Jiasi, although they were both in the middle stage of the foundation building realm, Wei Jiasi had been in the foundation building realm for almost 100 years. Although she was still in the middle stage, she was already in the 6th layer. Mo Tiange, on the other hand, had just broken through and was only in the 4th layer. For qi condensation cultivators, a gap of 2 levels was already enough to affect their strength, let alone foundation establishment cultivators. Once Mo Tiange's spiritual aura entered Wei Jiasi's meridians, the rebounding pressure made her frown. However, in the next moment, she activated the spirit concealing pendant. This spirit concealing pendant originally had the function of concealing one's constitution and gathering spiritual aura. The effect of gathering spiritual aura could make the wearer's spells more refined. After Zhong Muling refined it again, this effect became even more obvious. A wisp of pure spiritual aura flowed out of the spirit-concealing pendant. Mo Tiange immediately felt the pressure on her lesson. In addition, her spiritual aura had the attribute of pure yin, so it was both soft and tough. Very soon, her spiritual aura deftly neutralized Wei Jiasi's rebound force and advanced along her meridians towards her dantian. Han Qingyu looked at her in astonishment. She originally wanted to help Mo Tiange later, but she didn't expect Mo Tiange to break free on her own. However, thinking that this junior martial sister of hers had a lot of fated chances, Han Qingyu figured there might be something special about her spiritual aura, so she didn't say anything and focused on slowly guiding her spiritual aura downwards. Before long, Mo Tiange's and Han Qingyu's spiritual auras converged in her dantian. Soon after, this combined spiritual aura flowed along the special passage between her dantian and her sea of knowledge, entering her sea of knowledge. For a moment, the two of them both had pained expressions on their faces, making Luo Fengxue extremely nervous. Mo Tiange indeed felt an enormous pressure in her sea of knowledge. The sea of knowledge was the dwelling place of primordial spirits and was very far away from her dantian. However, her dantian was the only place connected to her sea of knowledge. If she wanted to enter her sea of knowledge, she had to go through her dantian, where her spiritual aura was stored. The spiritual pressure in her dantian didn't make her and Han Qingyu feel too uncomfortable. However, after entering the narrow passage in her sea of knowledge, the two of them felt that they couldn't exert any strength, so they could only slowly move forward bit by bit. Finally, the spiritual aura entered the boundless sea of knowledge. The two of them heaved sighs of relief as they found Wei Jiasi's sleeping primordial spirit. You must be careful. Ordinary cultivators' primordial spirits are very fragile. Even this kind of weak spiritual aura can still cause pain to the divine sense. Let's wrap up her primordial spirit first, then I'll slowly apply pressure on it. Yes, Senior Martial Sister Han. Mo Tiange steadily controlled her spiritual aura, listening to Han Qingyu's instructions. With the help of the spirit-concealing pendant, Mo Tiange's ability to control spiritual aura was also very subtle. She gently spread her spiritual aura and spread it over Wei Jiasi's primordial spirit, then stopped moving. Han Qingyu, on the other hand, was much more cautious. After a series of complicated manipulations, Wei Jiasi's eyelashes fluttered and a pained expression appeared on her face. Fengxue, spirit-nourishing pills. Luo Fengxue immediately took out spirit-nourishing pills and fed them to Wei Jiasi. Wei Jiasi's primordial spirit immediately stabilized. Soon after, she opened her eyes. Second junior martial sister, don't move. Wait until we extract the spiritual aura from your meridians, then you can use it. Upon hearing Han Qingyu's shout, Wei Jiasi was startled for a moment, but she immediately did as she was told. Mo Tiange and Han Qingyu spent a lot of effort to extract the spiritual aura from Wei Jiasi's meridians. The loss of this spiritual aura didn't really matter to them, but the sea of knowledge was a very fragile place. If they were careless and left spiritual aura inside, Wei Jiasi would definitely be in trouble. Phew! This was the first time Mo Tiange used spiritual aura to do such a meticulous thing, so she felt extremely tired. Luo Fengxue hastily helped her down and fed her some medicinal pills. She then went back to Wei Jiasi and asked, "Second senior martial sister, are you all right?" Wei Jiasi opened her eyes. She seemed to be a bit confused. "What happened?" Han Qingyu said gently. "Second junior martial sister, you and Tiange ran into an accident. You were bewitched by an illusory formation, but you're all right now. Don't think too much about it. Take a rest first. I'll tell you about it later." Wei Jiasi didn't say anything. She lowered her head and seemed to be in a daze, seemingly trying to recall something. Second senior martial sister? Luo Fengxue was a bit worried. After a long time, Wei Jiasi finally regained her composure. She shook her head and said, "I'm all right. Rest assured. How's the situation now?" Han Qingyu smiled and said, "I'm here, so what are you worried about? Second junior martial sister, rest well. I'll tell you in detail when you're spirited again." Wei Jiasi's expression changed, but in the end, she still nodded. This made Han Qingyu and Luo Fengxue feel relieved. They stood up and said, "In that case, you rest first. We won't disturb you any longer." "Wait." Wei Jiasi raised her head. Her gaze swept over Emo Tienge's body. "Tienge, I want to talk to you." Emo Tienge was stunned. She looked at Han Qingyu and Luo Fengxue. Luo Fengxue's brows were tightly knitted. Han Qingyu, on the other hand, was silent for a moment. She then gave Emo Tienge a meaningful glance and said with a smile, "Tienge, since you don't have anything else to do, you can keep your senior martial sister Wei company for now." Emo Tienge nodded and said, "I understand, senior martial sister Han." After Han Qingyu and Luo Fengxue left, Emo Tienge walked towards Wei Jiasi. She tidied up the bed, then helped Wei Jiasi sit up. "Senior martial sister Wei, do you have anything to tell me?" Wei Jiasi remained silent, but her gaze never left Emo Tienge. Her gaze seemed to be scrutinizing and considering Emo Tienge. Emo Tienge stopped and sat quietly on the edge of the bed. Han Qingyu wanted Emo Tienge to be a bit more patient. After all, Wei Jiasi had always been like this. Moreover, she was currently injured. Emo Tienge didn't care about this, so she agreed with Han Qingyu. Now that Wei Jiasi was looking at her like this, she didn't feel displeased at all. Emo Tienge had a rough childhood and was accustomed to the fickleness of the world. How could she take these things seriously? After a long time, Wei Jiasi finally spoke. "Tienge, do you know why I asked you to stay?" Her tone was actually very calm. Emo Tienge calmed down. The corners of her lips curled up into a faint smile. "I don't know." Wei Jiasi closed her eyes. No one knew what she was thinking. After a long time, she opened her eyes again and continued to speak calmly. I remember that I did something bad to you in the illusion, so I think I have the responsibility to explain it to you." Senior martial sister doesn't have to do this. Emo Tienge didn't want to hear those words. "Senior martial sister doesn't owe me anything, and you've never wronged me. You were just influenced by the illusion. What's there to explain?" "No." Wei Jiasi stared at her resolutely. Her gaze was stubborn. "Although my character isn't good and I'm unsociable and arrogant, I've never bullied or humiliated others. If I don't explain it clearly, I'll feel bad." Emo Tienge was silent for a while. She felt powerless in her heart. What happened between her and Wei Jiasi was actually Wei Jiasi's own feelings. In fact, it had nothing to do with Emo Tienge, but now, Emo Tienge sighed. "All right, I'll listen to whatever senior martial sister Wei wants to say." After obtaining Emo Tienge's agreement, Wei Jiasi's gaze softened and she showed a rare smile. She was actually a beautiful woman. Her eyebrows were elegant, and her face was like spring. If she smiled often, she would definitely be very amiable and cute. After thinking for a while, Wei Jiasi said softly, "Tienge, you should know that I don't like you. I don't know whether you know the reason or not. In our Clear Spring Peak, Grandmaster was a genius. Aside from the deceased martial uncle Qingyuan, he had a total of 6 advanced inner disciples. Our master ranked first, was the oldest, and also had the most disciples. More than 100 years ago, Master was still very young, and he only had 6 or 7 disciples. Among them, the only female disciples were me and eldest martial sister. Although the inner disciples of us core formation cultivators all had double spiritual roots, there were good and bad ones. Among them, I had the best aptitude, so my cultivation progressed very quickly. Often, even my senior martial brothers couldn't catch up to me. It could be said that I was the #1 disciple among the 3rd generation of Grandmaster's disciples. Just like that, over time, I gradually developed a sense of pride. Martial uncle Shoujing came before I entered the sect. In fact, his age was similar to us 3rd generation disciples. Because my aptitude was excellent, I was accepted into the sect when I was a child. When I entered the sect, he seemed to have just built his foundation. At that time, I only knew that Grandmaster had an advanced inner disciple who was related to him by blood. His aptitude was quite high, and his temperament was even better. However, I didn't take martial uncle seriously because I thought I would definitely surpass him, just like how I surpassed my senior martial brothers one by one. But I never expected that not only would I never be able to achieve this goal, but I would also be left further and further behind. Martial uncle built his foundation when he was 20 years old. At that time, martial uncle Lingxi of Sweet Dew Peak had already built his foundation when he was 17 years old, so he didn't attract any attention. I also thought that for elite disciples with high aptitudes like us, building our foundation was a relatively easy threshold to cross. Building it at around 20 years old only meant that we were quite lucky. But I never expected that on the first day I saw martial uncle. Tiange was silent as she listened to Wei Jiaxi's sometimes sweet and sometimes painful recollection. She felt empty in her heart. She couldn't even hear Wei Jiaxi's voice clearly. What was the point of telling her all this? Should she rejoice or sigh for it? Tiange, I'm very sorry. I thought I controlled my emotions very well, but in the illusory formation, I exposed myself and even had thoughts of hurting people. Feng Shui was right. I walked further and further down this path, and I couldn't control myself anymore. Because martial uncle was good to you, although I tried my best to suppress it, my heart still felt unfair. In fact, after I fainted, I was still conscious. I thought about it for a very, very long time. I know that if I want to achieve anything on the path of cultivation, I must give it up. But I tried again and again, and when I wanted to give it up, I felt like I was even going to give up my own heart. So, I thought it through. I don't care anymore. If I can't get it, then I won't ask for it. If I can't give it up, then I won't give it up. Right now, I'm about 100 years old, just a hair's breadth away from the late stage of the foundation establishment realm. If I don't form my core, I'll probably have about 200 years left in my lifespan. In 200 years, Uncle Master might not be able to form his nascent soul. With martial uncle's temperament, if he doesn't succeed in his cultivation, he definitely won't be trapped by his emotions. By the time he decides to dual cultivate, I'm afraid I'll already be long gone. At this point, Wei Jiaxi smiled at Tiange. Her gaze was filled with sorrow and determination. She said, "That being the case, what should I be afraid of? Let it be like this for the rest of my life. I won't force it. If I can get it, I'll get it. If I can't let it go, I won't let it go. Whether it's foundation establishment or core formation, it's up to fate." Tiange remained silent. This was the best attitude Wei Jiaxi had ever shown her, but Tiange couldn't force out a smile. Because Tiange clearly felt the sorrow behind Wei Jiaxi's words. This senior martial sister Wei, no matter who it was, she was such a proud person, yet now, she was willing to give up her future. But from another point of view, wasn't this also a sign that she'd come to terms with it? This is my love alone. Even if the person I love has nothing to do with it, I'll guard him alone. If I can't get him, I don't care what the consequences will be. Tiange, martial uncle, senior martial sister Wei, Tiange suddenly interrupted Wei Jiaxi. I think you don't need to tell me this. What happens to martial uncle has nothing to do with me. Wei Jiaxi was also silent, but in the next moment, she chuckled softly and said, "Yes, I was confused." "All right, Tienge, please forgive me for what happened in the past. From now on, whether it has nothing to do with you or not, it's all my business. It has nothing to do with you. Wei Jiaxi woke up. Han Qingyu spent some effort to help her recover her strength and finally told her what happened. Wei Jiaxi was silent for a long time. Sure enough, she gave the answer they expected. This must be a conspiracy. Now, Danding School had many of their martial brothers and their master. Luo Fengxue was very anxious. She shouted, "Then what should we do now?" Han Qingyu pondered for a moment and said, "It's useless to be anxious now. We've already been delayed here for a while. If they wanted to set up something, they've probably already done it. As for summoning talismans, I've tried, but I don't know whether Master has received it or not." This place was quite far from Danding School. Ordinary summoning talismans couldn't be used unless they used 1,000 miles sound-transmitting talismans or 10,000 miles sound-transmitting talismans. The talisman Han Qingyu used to report this matter to Master Daoist Xianxia was none other than the 1,000 miles sound-transmitting talisman. However, it was highly likely that it was blocked by a great defensive formation. "Is there any news from Yu Clan?" Wei Jiaxi asked. "No." Han Qingyu shook her head. "I mentioned it to them, but they don't know what's going on. Clan Master Yu also tried to send a message to the school, but I don't know if he can do it or not." The four of them once again sank into silence. Right now, it was definitely too late for them to return to Danding School. They couldn't even guarantee their safety. Once a war broke out, it would already be great if they could rely on Yu Clan's terrain and formations to stay alive. If they left without permission and the demonic beasts ran rampant outside, perhaps, senior martial sisters, I'm afraid we don't have any other choice but to wait. After thinking for a long time, Mo Tienge said slowly, "We're only 4 foundation-building cultivators. There's a nascent soul cultivator in Danding School. Even if we fall into their trap, I'm afraid it won't be easy to attack. Martial Uncle Xianxia and the other martial brothers are guests in Danding School, so it shouldn't be too dangerous. On the other hand, it's hard to say for us. Yu Clan only has several foundation-building cultivators, and their cultivation levels aren't as high as ours. Relying on them definitely won't work." Han Qingyu pondered for a long time before she finally nodded. "Tienge's right. If those demonic beasts can't defeat Danding School in a fierce battle and change their target, we'll be in danger. Then what should we do?" Luo Fengxue asked. Wei Jiaxi said faintly, "I think we should wait." Mo Tienge nodded in agreement. Upon seeing their reactions, Han Qingyu said, "I also agree with waiting. We still can't see the current situation clearly, so it'd be better to stay put and deal with the ever-changing situation." Since the three of them said so, Luo Fengxue was also speechless. "All right, I also can't think of any ideas." The four of them agreed that Han Qingyu would be the one to negotiate with Yu Clan. When Yu Clan's patriarch learned of their conjectures, he became very nervous. Mo Tienge took some time to enter the virtual sky world, but she sat silently in the small room for a long time. In fact, if she stayed in the virtual sky world and didn't go out, she would naturally be very safe. However, excluding Yu Clan, which had nothing to do with her, what would happen to Luo Fengxue and the other two? Logically speaking, Xianxia School gave her a place to live and provided her with the things she needed to cultivate. She owed them a favor, not a grudge. In terms of affection, the three of them were her martial sisters. Wei Jiaxi aside, Han Qingyu and Luo Fengxue had always taken good care of her. Considering both sides, how could she disregard their safety? Of course, she could also bring them into the virtual sky world. However, she immediately rejected this idea. The virtual sky world definitely couldn't appear in front of others. Otherwise, her life would definitely be in danger. After thinking for a while, Mo Tienge made up her mind. She was no longer a little aura-refining cultivator who had no ability to protect herself anymore. She was now in the foundation-building realm. She had a certain amount of ability, and she also had several magic treasures. Demonic beasts weren't good at using external objects, so she had a lot of confidence in escaping. With this thought in mind, she opened her Qianquan bag and began to prepare. The magic weapons she had were the purple wooden cauldron, the white silk handkerchief, the enchanting lantern, the spirit-concealing pendant, and the virtual sky world. Among them, the purple wooden cauldron and the virtual sky world were useless in fights of magical powers, and the spirit-concealing pendant was the auxiliary type. Only the white silk handkerchief and the enchanting lantern could be used for direct attacks. Other magic tools included the shuttle of flying Apsara, the heaven and earth cloud silk armor, the land-fleeing ruler, and the flying needle she bought not long ago. The heaven and earth cloud silk armor could be worn directly on her body, the land-fleeing ruler was used for escaping, the shuttle of flying Apsara was used for attacking, and the flying needle was used for sneak attacks. In addition, there were talismans and other things given to her by martial uncle Xianin. If she really thought about it, she had a lot of magic treasures in her hands. Her odds of winning against cultivators in the same realm as her were relatively high, let alone against demonic beasts. Besides, she only needed a little bit of time to return to the virtual sky world. Using it together with the land-fleeing ruler couldn't be any better. She believed that even if her opponent was a core formation cultivator, as long as she was fast enough, she still had a chance to escape. Thinking up to this point, Tiange revealed a faint smile. The virtual sky world and the fated chances of deification cultivators weren't something everyone could come across. Her current strength was also top-notch among middle-stage foundation-building cultivators. Even against late-stage foundation-building cultivators, her odds of winning weren't low. If she couldn't win, she could always run. What was there to be afraid of? Chapter 125. The group of 5 stood at the top of the mountain, looking at the flaming peak in the distance. That was the main vein of Mount Skyfire, where the Pill Cauldron Gate was located. The fire was still burning fiercely, but its color had dimmed a lot. With their foundation-building divine sense, they couldn't see what was happening there, but they could see the demonic beasts flitting across the sky from time to time not far away. In the past 2 days, Han Qingyu and Patriarch Yu hadn't received any response from the sound-transmitting talismans they had sent. They had long since been mentally prepared for this. The demonic beasts' attack on the Pill Cauldron School had already begun. The people standing here, Tiange, Han Qingyu, Luo Fengxue, Patriarch Yu, and his wife, were all silent. This matter had already exceeded their capabilities. Aside from waiting, there was nothing they could do. In fact, they could understand why the demonic beasts were so obsessed with Pill Cauldron School. The Danding School was the #1 alchemist sect on Kunwu Mountain, and medicinal pills were exactly what demonic beasts lacked the most. Every time they came out of the southern forest, they would attack the sects on Kunwu Mountain in order to seize medicinal pills. As soon as they had the chance, they would naturally focus their attacks on the Danding School. However, Danding School wasn't to be trifled with. Although it was only slightly larger than a mid-level cultivation sect, it also had 3 nascent soul grandmasters. In addition to the mountain-protecting grand formation, magic treasures, and so on, the demonic beasts would have to expend a lot of effort to capture Danding School. Now, these people were happy on one side and worried on the other. They were happy because these demonic beasts completely ignored them and had no intention of attacking them. However, they were worried because if the Pill Cauldron School was attacked, their family and friends, the 5 of them were preoccupied and no one spoke. Wei Jiasi still hadn't recovered, so the other 2 foundation-building cultivators from Yu Clan were responsible for patrolling the area. These people were merely foundation establishment cultivators. In this kind of sect war, they could not do much at all. After a long time, Han Qingyu finally said, "Let's go back." Tiange and Luo Fengxue glanced at each other then nodded. Han Qingyu then turned around and said, "Patriarch Yu, my martial sister and I will take our leave first. If there are any movements, please inform us." Patriarch Yu's expression was solemn as he cupped his hands absent-mindedly. Han Qingyu shook her head and sighed. She then led Tiange and Luo Fengxue down the mountain. Yu Clan was a clan that relied on Pill Cauldron Gate, and they even had cultivators in the sect. Presumably, Patriarch Yu was more troubled than them. If Danding School fell in this demonic beast attack, then Yu Clan would definitely not have a good ending. Even if they weren't devoured by the demonic beasts, they wouldn't have any backing in the future and would definitely be bullied and humiliated again. Unfortunately, Yu Clan's current foundation-building cultivators were all very old. Thinking up to this point, Han Qingyu could only shake her head. Every sect or clan had their own difficulties. Even for herself, it was already very good if she could preserve her own life. Once she returned to her residence, Mo Tiange entered the virtual sky world again to meditate and cultivate. Right now, the war was right in front of her, so she wasn't in the mood to learn pill concocting. The little inferno beast she caught to provide her ardent yang real fire was raised in the virtual sky world while she cultivated the soul-refining art. Now that she cultivated the soul-refining art without any misgivings, she didn't have any misgivings about cultivating the soul-refining art. Therefore, in the past few days, she devoted almost all of her energy to cultivating it. Right now, her divine sense had more or less formed a physical body. This was her hidden trump card. Even martial uncle Xianin, who gave her the technique, probably didn't expect her to be able to cultivate her divine sense into a corporeal form so quickly. Other people who cultivated this art would tremble with fear. It was simply impossible for them to be like her. Furthermore, after going through the 5 spirits cultivation art, her primordial spirit was no longer as weak as before, so cultivating the soul-refining art could be said to be twice the result with half the effort. Her current realm was probably something ordinary people would need to cultivate for several dozen years to be able to compare to. In a fight of magical powers, all kinds of magic tools, magic weapons, and talismans had their nemesis, and they were also on guard against each other. The reason why Mo Tiange regarded the soul-refining art as her trump card was because she was only in the foundation-building realm. She reckoned no one would expect her to be able to control her divine sense to attack others. In the following days, aside from cultivating, she also went out to inquire about the situation of Danding School's war. Their decision not to attack was indeed correct. Since Danding School had nascent soul cultivators, the demonic beasts would naturally only dare to attack them if they had 8th rank or higher cultivators. From what they heard, the demonic beasts had 3 8th rank demonic beasts and 1 9th rank demonic beast. As for Danding School, they only had 3 nascent soul cultivators in total, and all of them were in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. Their strength couldn't be compared to Danding School's. The current war was very tragic. The mountain ridge where Yu Clan was located was too close to Danding School. A foundation-building cultivator's journey would take a day, but a core formation and nascent soul cultivator's journey would only take a few minutes. Because of this, battles would affect this area from time to time. Fortunately, the power of the 4 symbols formation Mo Tiange modified was quite strong. Now, all Yu Clan's cultivators stayed inside the 4 symbols formation and opened it, so they were temporarily safe. However, safety was only temporary. Now that Danding School had fallen, Yu Clan would definitely be affected. At that time, they would also be involved. What they could do now was to preserve their strength as much as possible. In addition, they weren't Danding School's disciples, so Xianxia School wouldn't ignore Master Daoist Xuanin's presence. Observing the situation, cultivating, and waiting for an opportunity. A month later, the battle entered a stalemate. More and more demonic beasts appeared in the vicinity of Yu Clan, so they finally couldn't stay out of it. Fellow Daoists, please take a seat. In the middle of the night, while Mo Tiange was still cultivating, Yu Clan's steward came to summon the 4 martial sisters. The 4 of them were baffled. Could it be that something important happened? Inside the hall, the moonstones emitted a soft light, illuminating the hall as bright as day. All 4 foundation-building cultivators of Yu Clan were present. Once Yu Clan's patriarch saw them, he smiled and politely asked them to sit. For matters like this, Han Qingyu was the one who handled them. After Mo Tiange greeted the people of Yu Clan, she silently sat down on the guest seat. Patriarch Yu, may I ask why you called us sisters here so late at night? After exchanging conventional greetings, Han Qingyu went straight to the point. Hesitation appeared on Patriarch Yu's face. It seemed he found it a bit difficult to speak, so he cast an awkward glance at Han Qingyu. Han Qingyu smiled and said, although you and I don't come from the same sect, we're all on the same boat in the current situation. What else can Patriarch Yu not say? Upon hearing what Han Qingyu said, a resolute expression appeared on Patriarch Yu's face. He nodded and said, what fellow Daoist Han said makes sense. Therefore, I think it'd be better to explain this matter to fellow Daoists. He paused for a moment before continuing. Fellow Daoist Han should know that our Yu clan is only a small clan relying on Danding School. We don't have any core formation cultivators, nor do we have any influence. Right now, in Danding School, we only have 2 juniors who have hopes of advancing to the core formation realm. There's simply nothing for demonic beasts to covet. I think your master sent you to our Yu clan because he wants to take care of you. Based on this, your future in Xianxia School will definitely be bright. When he said that, aside from Han Qingyu, he also cast a glance at Mo Tiange. Although this Patriarch Yu's cultivation level wasn't obvious, he was very experienced. Han Qingyu was already in the late stage of the foundation building realm. As an elite disciple, she would definitely advance to the core formation realm one day. Although she might not succeed, ordinary disciples like them couldn't compare to her. As for Mo Tiange, according to Han Qingyu, she was already in the middle stage of the foundation building realm at such a young age, so her future was also limitless. The current development of the situation has certainly exceeded your expectations. Right now, although our Yu clan can still be considered safe, we're also in a precarious situation. Right now, more and more battles are happening outside the formation. From time to time, cultivators from Danding School ask for help, so our Yu clan can't just ignore them. Fellow Daoists, it's only a matter of time before our Yu clan joins the battle. Today, I learned from an injured Danding School cultivator that one of our 2 Yu clan disciples in Danding School has already fallen. At this point, a slight fluctuation finally appeared on Patriarch Yu's calm and tranquil expression. Yu clan only had 2 cultivators with hopes of advancing to the core formation realm. Now that one of them had fallen in the battle, it was a huge loss for Yu clan. Besides, that person might even be a junior of Patriarch Yu's. Patriarch Yu continued, since the situation is like this, I'll tell fellow Daoists the truth. Patriarch Yu straightened his expression and a resolute expression flitted across his face. He said word by word, since we can't avoid this disaster, our Yu clan will join the battle from now on. Mo Tiange and the others raised their heads and looked at each other, but none of them said anything. In fact, they weren't surprised. Yu clan would be dragged into the demonic beast battle sooner or later. However, they were a bit surprised that Patriarch Yu was so resolute. Mo Tiange looked to her left and right. When Madame Yu heard what Patriarch Yu said, she quietly held Patriarch Yu's hand as if she wanted to comfort him. The other 2 foundation-building cultivators of Yu clan also calmly looked at Patriarch Yu. Obviously, they approved of his decision. Han Qingyu was silent for a moment before she finally raised her head and said with a smile, we admire fellow Daoists' decisiveness. Patriarch Yu smiled and said sincerely, but if we do this, we'll be wasting your master's painstaking efforts. Fellow Daoists came to our Yu clan to help us protect our clansmen, but now we're going to drag fellow Daoists down with us. I feel guilty about this matter, so I'm telling you this frankly. For the sake of your own safety, fellow Daoists can leave. We definitely won't stop you. Patriarch Yu's expression was sincere and didn't seem fake. However, this matter was of great importance, so Han Qingyu didn't immediately make a decision. Instead, she pondered for a while before she said, Patriarch Yu, since that's the case, could you let us martial sisters discuss this matter for a while? Of course. Patriarch Yu revealed a smile. Our Yu clan will join the battle tomorrow. Fellow Daoists can go back and discuss it in detail. If you come to a decision, it won't be too late to tell us tomorrow. In that case, many thanks. Han Qingyu stood up and saluted him. Patriarch Yu hastily returned the salute. We don't dare. Mo Tiange could see that Patriarch Yu naturally wanted them to stay. After all, their strength was far superior to the foundation-building cultivators of Yu clan. However, the current situation was unpredictable. Core formation and even nascent soul cultivators would participate in the battle, so staying here wasn't safe. Besides, they were Xianxia school disciples, so they couldn't be offended. The four martial sisters returned to the small courtyard they lived in and gathered in Han Qingyu's room. For a while, the four of them didn't say anything. Even Luo Fengxue, who was the most talkative, looked like she had a lot on her mind. After a long time, Han Qingyu raised her head and swept a glance at them. She said, "All right, do you have anything you want to say? This matter is of great importance, so I won't use my eldest martial sister's name to make a decision. If you have something to say, you can speak frankly." Eldest martial sister? Luo Fengxue wanted to say something but hesitated. Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue had been friends for several years. Upon seeing the struggle on Luo Fengxue's face, Mo Tiange could roughly guess what Luo Fengxue wanted to say. Han Qingyu said, "There's only us martial sisters here. What's there to be afraid of?" Luo Fengxue looked at Wei Jiasi and Mo Tiange then said, "Eldest martial sister, we're not Danding school disciples. Now that the situation is critical, they definitely won't blame us if we leave on our own." Han Qingyu nodded. "You're right. We cultivators don't value loyalty like chivalrous people do. Now that we're out of our strength, we can naturally leave." Having obtained Han Qingyu's affirmation, Luo Fengxue felt reassured. She stared at Han Qingyu expectantly and said, "Then we..." Han Qingyu shook her head. "That's not what I'm thinking. Think about it. Right now, the flames of war are everywhere. Even if we leave this place, how are we going to return to Xianxia school?" Luo Fengxue was stunned. She wasn't good at fights of magical powers, so she naturally hoped to leave the war situation as soon as possible. However, what Han Qingyu said was also true. When we leave Xianxia school, our masters and martial uncles will send us back with flying magic weapons. If we return to Xianxia school on our own, I'm afraid it'll take us 1 or 2 months. On the way back, there will be flames of war everywhere. How are we going to protect ourselves? Luo Fengxue couldn't answer this question. Eldest martial sister, do you support staying here? Han Qingyu slowly shook her head. No. For the time being, I can't think of a solution. I still don't have an idea. Luo Fengxue was also silent. Han Qingyu then looked at Wei Jiasi. Second junior martial sister, what do you think? Wei Jiasi's cultivation level had already recovered in the past few days, but her complexion was still pale. When she heard Han Qingyu's question, she seemed to be in a daze. Han Qingyu called out again, "Second junior martial sister?" Wei Jiasi suddenly realized that the three people's gazes were on her, but she only said, "I'll let eldest martial sister decide." Upon seeing Wei Jiasi's appearance, Han Qingyu sighed inwardly. In the end, she turned towards Mo Tiange and asked, "Tiange, what about you?" Mo Tiange muttered to herself for a long time before she finally said, "Senior martial sister Han, I think we'd better stay here for the time being and observe the situation." "Stay here?" Han Qingyu and Luo Fengxue glanced at each other, then shifted their gazes to Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange nodded. "Correct. Senior martial sisters, let me put it this way. I'm quite confident in you clan's 4 symbols formation. Unless several core formation cultivators or above attack it, it won't be broken. Moreover, with senior martial sister Han in charge and senior martial sister Luo familiar with personnel management, and me in charge of the formation, the chances of us persevering are very high." Mo Tiange quickly swept her gaze over them then said, "Of course, this also has its risks. If this place is noticed by high-rank demonic beasts and they focus their attacks on us, we might not be able to escape." Han Qingyu and Luo Fengxue both sank into contemplation. Compared to what Mo Tiange said earlier, the risks weren't too great. They also didn't have any better ideas, it was just staying here or leaving. However, escaping with their lives in this chaotic war was also not easy. The first to make a decision was Han Qingyu. After thinking for a moment, Han Qingyu revealed a determined expression and said, "Tiange, since you're confident, why don't we stay here?" "Eldest martial sister," Luo Fengxue called out. Han Qingyu turned towards Luo Fengxue and said with a faint smile, "I've been thinking about it. If we want to preserve our lives, we might as well borrow Yu Clan's strength. Of course, their strength isn't that strong, so the four of us can exterminate Yu Clan if we want to. However, Yu Clan has been rooted here for a long time, so we can make use of it. Whether we borrow people or borrow land, it'll be much safer than staying outside by ourselves. But Luo Fengshue's mind was in a mess. She hadn't built her foundation long ago and had lived in a famous cultivation group since she was a child, so she wasn't interested in fights of magical powers. Now that they were involved in a chaotic war, she was the most helpless one. Fengshue, don't be afraid. Han Qingyu comforted her softly. You've never been in a war, so you're not used to it. Your second martial sister and I both experienced the demonic beast riots 60 years ago. We were also like this in the beginning, but after experiencing a lot, we gradually got used to it. Have some confidence in yourself. You're a disciple of a famous cultivation group, and you also have magic tools and magic weapons bestowed upon you by Master. You're much stronger than other people, so what's there to be afraid of? After being comforted, Luo Fengshue actually calmed down a bit. Upon seeing Luo Fengshue's appearance and receiving a meaningful glance from Han Qingyu, Emo Tienga walked over, held Luo Fengshue's hand and said with a smile, Senior Martial Sister Luo, you're my senior martial sister. You mustn't lose to me. Luo Fengshue revealed a bitter smile and said calmly, Tienga, I won't hide it from you. In the past, I didn't think you were capable, but after this incident, I realized I was a frog at the bottom of a well and underestimated others. A few days ago, it was you who reminded me not to be too anxious, and these past few days, you've been much calmer than me. Senior Martial Sister Luo. Seeing that Luo Fengshue was becoming more and more remorseful as she spoke, Emo Tienga interrupted her. The current situation is like this. You and I should pull ourselves together. What Tienga said is right. Han Qingyu was very perceptive. Upon seeing Emo Tienga's gloomy expression, she knew Emo Tienga might have thought of something unpleasant, so she immediately changed the topic. In addition, there's another reason why I want to stay here. What? Han Qingyu took out a jade slip and said, Before we left, Master told me that if something unexpected happened, I must protect you and support him. This time, even Wei Jiasi, who didn't care about this matter, was stunned. They all knew that Han Qingyu had a steady temperament and handled matters steadily. As the eldest martial sister, she served their master diligently and took good care of her junior martial brothers and sisters, so their master had always trusted her. In comparison, Wei Jiasi didn't find it unfair because she always thought that their eldest martial sister was good at handling miscellaneous matters, so it was normal for their master to entrust matters unrelated to their cultivation to their eldest martial sister. But now that Han Qingyu took out their master's secret order, Wei Jiasi felt a bit upset. As it turned out, not only did their master trust their eldest martial sister, but he also entrusted her with an important task. Wei Jiasi, who had also been their master's advanced inner disciple for a long time, actually didn't know anything about this beforehand. Han Qingyu didn't know or care about Wei Jiasi's little thoughts. She handed the jade slip to Wei Jiasi, who then passed it to them one by one. After the three of them finished reading the jade slip, Han Qingyu finally said, Master already anticipated that this trip wouldn't go smoothly, so he gave me this order and told me to do as I see fit. Right now, I think Tienga's words are very reasonable. That being the case, we might as well do as Master said. The three of them didn't say anything. The order Master Daoist Xianyin left behind was very simple. He told them to wait for an opportunity to find a place outside the Danding Gate. If there was any danger, they were to stay there to support the other disciples in order to preserve their strength. From what he said, it was obvious that he already knew this trip wouldn't be simple, so he sent them out to avoid dragging them into the flames of war. First, it was because he wanted to take care of the female disciples. Second, it was because he had confidence in their ability to handle matters. Senior Martial Sister Han, after a long time, Emo Tienga said slowly, Since that's the case, let's do as Martial Uncle Xianyin said. I think Yu Clan's decision is perfect. We might as well borrow Yu Clan's land for the time being and rely on each other. If things go south, We're all foundation-building cultivators, so it'll be easy for us to escape. And what Xianxia said is exactly what I thought. Second junior martial sister, Feng Shui, what do you two think? You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.